Chapter 17. You've been practicing for 5 hours and you haven't moved? Ming Chao Ran looked at his second brother and said thoughtfully. You don't seem to be practicing the sword? Teacher is wise. Chu Yang smiled. He had always respected this teacher, whether it was in his previous life or now. Ming Chao Ran had always been indifferent, but no one dared to bully him. He seemed to be detached from the world and didn't care about anything, but nothing in the world could be hidden from him. His heart had a scale, weighing the world. Such a person, no matter where he was a rare talent. But he also had something in his heart that he wanted to protect, and that was his sect. Beyond the Heavens sect. That was why he didn't retreat when Beyond the Heavens sect was in danger. But he also protected his younger brother in the midst of a storm of blood. Maybe his teacher had other regrets, but Chu Yang didn't know. He only knew that his teacher often stood alone in the wind in the middle of the night, as if he was reminiscing, as if he was sighing, as if he was thinking of something. You're practicing your heart, your mind, and your sword's speed. You're also controlling the volume of the sword. Ming Chao Ran said lightly with his hands behind his back. Who taught you all these? No one taught me. I just feel that I need to use my heart when I use my sword. Every sword needs to be used with my heart in order to be effective. Chu Yang said. I used to practice the sword for the sake of practicing the sword, and I fell behind too much. Oh, not bad. Ming Chao Ran nodded lightly and waved his hand. Chu Yang felt a weight on his hand, and he saw that there was a water bottle in his hand. After you finished practicing the sword, you withdrew your sword heart and sword intent, and dispersed your heart sword energy. Then you said a few words to me. Today, your realm has stabilized, so you can drink water. Ming Chao Ran said with a smile. After excessive exercise, you can't continue to drink water. If you drank water the moment you stopped practicing the sword, then the results of your morning's hard work would be wasted. And it would be harmful to the body. But now, after a period of buffer, there was no problem. Yes. Chu Yang raised the water bottle, drank a few mouthfuls, and then put it down. Although he was extremely thirsty, he couldn't drink too much water. Everyone understood this principle, but there were not many who could truly control themselves. Ming Chao Ran had been looking at his face all this time. Only now did he slowly let out a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, Only by practicing the sword with your heart can you achieve the heart of the sword. Only when the heart of the sword is formed can one have the sword resolve. Only when the sword resolve is formed can one dominate the world. In your generation, all of you know this principle, but there aren't many who actually do it. Now you've barely comprehended this level. Not bad. However, we still need to continue working hard. He paused for a moment and said, I don't care how you practice the sword. But why did you control the volume of the sword? Chu Yang laughed mischievously and said, Master, all the swordsmen and saber men in the entire Chongtian continent are equally powerful. In short, those weapons that required scabbards were all made of iron. Some wealthy people would have scabbards made of gold, silver, or even black gold. There were even more expensive ones. But no matter what, it was still metal. The metal was firm, resistant to wear and tear, and could be used for a long time. Furthermore, it could be used as an offensive weapon as a last resort. These are all advantages. However, when a weapon is unsheathed, the friction between the scabbards makes a clear sound. Correct. Meng Chao Ran nodded. But if the sound is clear, it gives the enemy time to prepare. I think this is the shortcoming of the metal scabbards. Chu Yang said frankly and with assurance. Master, why do you practice the sword? It's to kill. If you want to exercise, you don't need weapons. Since you want to kill, why give the enemy time to prepare? Isn't it straightforward to kill with one strike? I practice the silent sword to attack when the enemy is unprepared. Chu Yang smiled and said, Jiang Hu is ruthless. A man should kill. Blood splashes for 3,000 miles. I always think that the highest level of killing is to kill without being seen. Killing without being seen? Just like how you framed Shi Qianshan? Meng Chao Ran tilted his head. His eyes suddenly became sharp. Chu Yang was startled. He didn't expect Meng Qiaoran to see through his plan. I have to say, framing Shi Qianshan is the most satisfying thing in my life. Chu Yang smiled calmly. He didn't deny it. Then he said in a low voice, "If he wasn't blinded by lust and blinded by greed, he wouldn't have been framed by me." Meng Qiaoran looked at him deeply. He sighed deeply and immediately skipped the topic. He clasped his hands behind his back and walked forward. He said indifferently, "You just said that you learned the sword to kill. Isn't that biased? You should know that in this world, there are a lot of lovable things. There are also a lot of concerns. Learning the sword is not necessarily to kill, but to protect. Using your own sword to protect what you care about. People or things." Meng Qiaoran sighed and said, "Human lives are important. If you can avoid killing, then don't kill. No matter how ruthless a murderer was, killing a person would hurt his heart a little. No matter if the person you kill is evil or not, after all, they are the blood of your father. They are also other people's children, husbands, brothers, and fathers. Master also said to protect, and I agree. But when others come to harm the things we protect, in order to not let our loved ones cry." Chu Yang followed Meng Qiaoran's footsteps and walked forward slowly. He said firmly, "Then we can only let the enemy's parents cry. This person must be killed." Meng Qiaoran said, "Or it is possible to let people off, let them off." "I let people off, but they won't let me off." Chu Yang said, "The human world is like this. It is better to solve crises and enemies as soon as possible. You have killed too many people." Meng Qiaoran said, "This is not good." He shook his head in pity. "You should know that if revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it? Then cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. That way, it will be over immediately." Chu Yang said bluntly, "Master, you are too soft-hearted. You are not like the people of Jianghu. You practice the sword silently, which is equivalent to a sneak attack. This goes against the martial arts rules of Jianghu. I am afraid that it will cause criticism. This will affect your future, and it will not be good." Chu Yang laughed and said, "Rules are rules. I am me. Why should I follow those rules? I think there is only one rule when I do things. That is to protect my own life. That is the biggest rule. If you lose your life, even if you follow the rules, it will be nonsense." He paused and laughed mockingly. "Not to mention, how many people in Jianghu still follow those rules? Those so-called rules have become the cause of death for honest people." Meng Qiaoran was silent. The master and disciple could not convince each other, but they both felt a sense of novelty. In Chu Yang's previous life, he only respected his master and never argued with him. Now, the two of them were talking and walking. Although they were talking about killing people, they felt warmth in their hearts. Meng Qiaoran was the same. He did not agree with Chu Yang's words, but he could not deny that they were reasonable. He did not say anything because even if it was his own disciple, he had never forced anyone. Everyone has their own path. How to walk, let them choose for themselves. "Master, there is one thing that I can't figure out," Chu Yang said thoughtfully. "You are talking about Shi Qianshan?" Meng Qiaoran smiled. "I have always condoned Shi Qianshan's hypocrisy to deceive you. I allowed Shi Qianshan to monopolize the sex resources, but I did not ask about it, right?" "Yes." Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and looked up. This matter was the doubt in his heart. Since Meng Qiaoran knew, why did he not stop it? Shi Qianshan was a disciple. Were the two of them not disciples? Chu Yang was not dissatisfied, but he knew that Meng Qiaoran must have his reasons. Right now, he was asking because the next step was to kill Shi Qianshan. But what if he ruined Meng Qiaoran's plan? Chapter 18. I didn't deal with it because it was Shi Qianshan's ability. You two are stupid. It's useless to talk about it, Meng Qiaoran said. Treacherous and cunning. Although it's despicable, it's also a skill. It's also a prerequisite for success in Jianghu. Shi Shan was not secretive enough and was discovered by you. Meng Qiaoran paused and said, Shi Shan is still a hypocrite. Chu Yang silently followed behind him for a while and said softly, I understand. Meng Qiaoran did not turn his head and continued to walk. His tone was still indifferent. If you did not discover, I will continue to indulge Shi Shan until he no longer needs my indulgence. Although I only have you 3 martial brothers in my sect, this is also Jianghu. Life and death, it's your own business, your own choice. When he said, Life and death, it's your own business, your own choice. When he said this, Meng Qiaoran's face did not change, but his voice suddenly became heavy. This sentence seemed ruthless, but Chu Yang sighed deeply. Master is only a guide. His own future path must be walked by himself. Meng Qiaoran's current inaction seemed ruthless, but in fact, it was to let his younger brother experience Jianghu. Even if it was a little late, it would still be a step ahead of the other brothers. Moreover, this was his own understanding. It was completely different from what others taught him. Although it was cruel, this kind of cruelty was something that he would experience sooner or later. The earlier he experienced it, the more likely he would be able to survive. In his previous life, after his sect was destroyed, he gradually understood his master's painstaking efforts. If you continue to be so stupid, when you start out in the future, sooner or later you will die in the hands of others. Then I will not have high hopes for you. Do not blame me for being cruel. Our Beyond the Heavens sect needs strong people, not idiots. Shi Shan is treacherous and ruthless. He is not a good person. Meng Qiaoran finally stood still. Chu Yang realized that they were already at the cliff behind the mountain. Meng Qiaoran said, But Shi Shan can succeed. His aptitude is also good. So I indulged him and suppressed you. Before this, all of you were very mediocre, too mediocre and simple. The smaller your achievements, the greater your chances of survival. Even if you were bullied, you would still be able to survive. I want my brother to live. I don't care which path you take. Meng Qiaoran said. Everything is decided by the heavens. If you hadn't suddenly become enlightened, I wouldn't have said anything to you. Perhaps I am not a competent teacher, but since the first time Shi Shan deceived you and you did not realize it, and were even grateful to him, I have already decided your life's path. He turned his head and looked deeply into Chu Yang's eyes. Until that day, when you started to test me. I understand. Meng Qiaoran's words were indifferent and emotionless. But Chu Yang felt a burst of gratitude. If Meng Qiaoran exposed Shi Shan's true colors, the two of them would suffer even more. Although I announced that I would be going into seclusion for the past few days, I have been secretly watching you all. Meng Qiaoran sighed and laughed. Only now did I realize that I, Meng Qiaoran, had actually made a mistake again. You, Chu Yang, have greatly exceeded my expectations. So, I began to change my original intention. Chu Yang blushed with shame. It was not that he had made his teacher make a mistake. In his previous life, he had indeed been this stupid, but his teacher said that he had made a mistake again. This sentence seemed to have a deeper meaning. Could it be that he had made a mistake once before? However, your character needs to change. Meng Qiaoran seemed to think for a while. Then, he said heavily, In Jianghu, killing is inevitable. But your words today are too murderous. And now you already know how to work hard. In the future, your achievements may not be below mine. So I am worried, if one day, you find your biological parents who abandoned you. So today, I want to talk to you. Haha. Chu Yang laughed coldly. His eyes flashed with a strong hatred. As a person of two lives, this was the biggest demon in his heart. Chu Yang was an orphan. Or, it should be said that he was an abandoned child. When Meng Qiaoran picked him up, he was still an infant. In the dead of winter, he was thrown in front of a dilapidated temple. After Chu Yang knew about this matter, the anger in his heart could not be contained. You gave birth to me. Why did you abandon me? Even if you threw me into a commoner's family, I could still live. but you threw me in front of a dilapidated temple on a cold winter night. Even if you threw me in the temple, I could still breathe a little more. You clearly wanted me to die. But you could not bear to kill your own newborn child. So, you chose to cover your ears while stealing a bell. But a child who was not even 1 year old. If he did not meet a kind person, wouldn't he die? How could there be such heartless parents in the world? Looking at the deep hatred on Chu Yang's face, Meng Qiaoran sighed deeply. Let me give you 3 words of advice. You must remember them well. First, without them, you would have survived. Second, everything has a cause and effect. There are no parents in the world who do not love their child. Thirdly, the heavenly Tao is the norm. Your life was given to you by your parents. Teacher is right, Chu Yang said calmly. Meng Qiaoran sighed in his heart. He knew that Chu Yang did not mean what he said. This knot in his heart could not be untied. He said, Teacher is right. He did not say, Little brother will remember. It was obvious. It was not surprising. Among the 800 disciples of Beyond the Heavens sect, there were many orphans. But most of them had lost their parents. There were only 2 children who were abandoned by their parents, Chu Yang and Tan Tan. The feeling of being abandoned, especially by his own biological parents, was indescribable. As one grew older and got used to seeing the world, one would become angrier. Especially, Chu Yang was a person with a strong sense of self-esteem. Chu Yang's reclusive character was born after he learned about the world. After learning about his own life, he became taciturn. Over time, he became like this. The hatred in his heart had been accumulating for 10 years. Meng Qiaoran sighed in his heart. He looked at his younger brother with pity. Under Chu Yang's calm face, Meng Qiaoran could feel a surge of sadness and anger. If it was ignited, even Chu Yang himself would be burned to ashes. Meng Qiaoran only knew that Chu Yang's anger had been accumulating for 10 years. But he would never have thought that his anger had been accumulating for more than 10 years. This was the accumulation of hatred from 2 lifetimes. You already know the sect's martial techniques. You also know the fists, legs, sabers, and swords. Besides the core martial techniques of Beyond the Heavens sect, you already know them all. Meng Qiaoran said softly. In the future, it will depend on you. The remaining core martial techniques of Beyond the Heavens sect can only be taught to the 10 brothers. Everything depends on you. Yes. Chu Yang nodded. The 2 of them were standing at the top of the mountain. At this moment, there was a burst of light in the east. The sun suddenly jumped out from the horizon. Meng Qiaoran's eyes narrowed as he stared at the east. His eyes seemed to be dyed with countless colorful clouds, emitting an indescribable brilliance. Slowly, it condensed into a dazzling ray of light. The sky was bright. Chu Yang suddenly felt that his master Meng Qiaoran's back at this moment was bleak and lonely. The sun had just risen. The slanting rays of light pulled Meng Qiaoran's body into a long shadow, spreading through the mountain forest. After a long time, Meng Qiaoran said in a low voice, Chu Yang, you are the first child I picked up. When I picked you up on that snowy night, I knew that there would be a tragedy. At that time, I wanted to throw you away. I didn't want to be involved in this karma. Chu Yang's body shook. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Meng Qiaoran's back. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. But there was one thing that changed my mind. Meng Qiaoran's back was facing Chu Yang, but he stretched out his hand. His fist gradually loosened. Inside, there was a jade pendant the size of a little finger. Chapter 19. The jade pendant was completely purple, just like the purple clouds that accompanied the sun when it first appeared in the sky. With one look, one would know that this strange purple was not a color that should exist in the human world. The moment it appeared in Meng Qiaoran's palm, because it came in contact with the sun, it suddenly shone brightly. It was as if all the purple in the world was gathered here. This was a piece of precious jade. With one look, Chu Yang came to this conclusion. In his previous life, he had traveled the world and seen countless rare treasures. He had even seen countless jades of the highest quality. However, there were very few that could compare to this small piece of jade in front of him. This piece of jade is purple crystal jade essence, Meng Qiaoran said quietly. Although it looks small, it is an extremely complete piece of jade essence. This kind of purple crystal jade essence is rarely seen in 10,000 years. Only 10,000 pieces of top-quality jade can compare to the value of one piece of purple crystal jade. Only in the core of a purple crystal jade mine that has been here for 10,000 years, there is a small chance that a piece of jade essence will appear. The value of this piece of purple crystal jade essence is unparalleled. Meng Qiaoran slowly turned around. When I picked you up, this piece of jade essence was hanging around your neck. His eyes were like lightning as he stared at Chu Yang's face. Chu Yang even felt a strong burning sensation on his face. Chu Yang's Adam's apple bobbed twice. Suddenly, his throat felt dry. He reached out to take this priceless piece of purple crystal jade essence. His usually steady hand was actually trembling. Was this the only token of his identity that he had? This piece of jade essence has the word Chu engraved on it, Meng Qiaoran said slowly. The surface of the jade essence is not damaged, but this word appeared on the inside. This kind of cultivation is something that even I can't match. I definitely can't do. The word Chu could be your first name or your last name. Meng Qiaoran sighed slightly. When I carried you out of there and climbed up a mountain, the sky suddenly cleared up. The night had passed and a sun appeared in the east. He paused and said, just like today, at this moment. The rising sun was the love of my life. So at that time, I gave you the name Chu Yang. Meng Qiaoran's voice was a little hoarse. Although his tone was calm, there seemed to be a surge of magma roaring under the calm. I hope that you won't disappoint the name Chu Yang. Don't waste this purple crystal jade essence. Meng Qiaoran took a deep breath and immediately calmed down. He said, your background shouldn't be ordinary. If you continue to be as mediocre as you were in the past, I won't give you this jade essence. Actually, I hope that you will live a mediocre life, Meng Qiaoran said softly. But I hope that you can live a peaceful life. He did not turn around, but his eyes were filled with deep emotions. Just like a father who had endured hardships, he only hoped that his son would be safe and sound, and did not have any extravagant hopes for wealth and honor. This was because great wealth came with corresponding risks. Parents wouldn't want their daughter to take any risks. Chu Yang listened quietly. He did not interrupt. But in his heart, huge waves surged to the heavens. Meng Qiaoran's words had completely disrupted his state of mind. These words seemed to be a simple and straightforward narration of Chu Yang's life experience. But Chu Yang could hear that these words contained too much information. Purple crystal jade essence. It was priceless and rarely seen in the world. There were words on the inside, but the surface was not damaged. Purple crystal jade essence was difficult to be damaged by swords and sabers. It also had the ability to avoid true energy and elemental energy. Even the innate saint power of the divine clan could not damage it. Purple crystal jade essence was naturally even more powerful. Even a revered martial artist would find it difficult to leave such a mark on it. Not to mention leaving words on the inside of the jade without damaging the surface. Could it be that the person who carved this word was an emperor-level martial artist? Or even higher? With such a rare treasure hanging around the neck of a baby in swaddling clothes, how could they abandon the baby? What was the inside story behind all of this? Chu Yang's background was shrouded in layers of mystery. If he wanted to uncover this mystery, he would need a considerable amount of strength. And the person who carved this word must have been an emperor-level martial artist, or even higher 10 years ago. Chu Yang's teeth lightly bit his lower lip. His eyes were fixed and flashed with an inexplicable light. He might not have been abandoned. There might be some other reason for this. This thought, once it arose, it was like a million rays of sunlight, dispersing the haze in his heart. It made his cold heart slowly warm up. He slowly closed his palm and held the piece of purple crystal jade essence tightly in his palm. The jade essence was smooth and cold, but Chu Yang was excited. He circulated his true energy in his hand and touched the jade essence. Suddenly, there was a strange warmth. This warmth was like a stream of air, flowing through his palm and into his meridians. Slowly, his whole body became warm. The tiredness from the morning's arduous cultivation had completely disappeared at this moment. Chu Yang's heart trembled. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Meng Chaoran. "Your feeling is not wrong." Meng Chaoran smiled. "This purple crystal jade essence has the ability to quickly recover from fatigue. It might also have other effects. You must take good care of it. But I advise you not to rely on this thing too much." "Yes." Chu Yang's eyes were full of gratitude. With such a treasure on him, he could cultivate day and night without stopping. Naturally, his cultivation would advance by leaps and bounds. No matter who it fell into, they would probably keep it for themselves. As long as Meng Chaoran did not say anything, Chu Yang would never know. Even if it was placed in front of him, he would not know that it was his own identification. But Meng Chaoran had silently kept it for 10 years and returned it to him. This kind of sentiment was rare in the world. In Chu Yang's heart, Meng Chaoran's care and persistence were far more precious than this purple crystal jade essence. Chu Yang also understood what Meng Chaoran meant by not relying on it too much. Because if there was no fatigue, there would be no limit to the body's endurance. And martial artists could only break through their current realm when they felt their limits. "From this jade pendant, if you are not from a wealthy family, then you must be from a Beyond the Heavens clan," Meng Chaoran slowly said. "Before your strength reaches a certain level, do not touch it. That will bring you a fatal disaster. If you reach that stage, even if the entire Beyond the Heavens sect goes all out, they may not be able to save your life. Remember this." "Yes. I will remember," Chu Yang solemnly replied. Ever since he saw this purple crystal jade essence, he had this feeling in his heart. "Also, one of my greatest wishes in life is to bring glory to Beyond the Heavens sect. Protect Beyond the Heavens sect." Meng Chaoran sighed. "Since you have the heart of a strong person, then help me protect it well." "Yes." Chu Yang nodded deeply. Others did not know, but he clearly knew that in 4 years, Beyond the Heavens sect would face a great calamity. Now that he had nodded, he had placed this matter on his shoulders. With his current insignificant cultivation, to do this, he might not be able to do it even if he put in 1,000 times more effort than others. But no matter what, in life, he had a first goal. Beyond the Heavens sect. Once Beyond the Heavens sect survived this crisis, it would be time for him to travel the world with his sword, to find the Sword of Calamity, to find Mo Qing Wu, and to solve the mystery of his birth. After Chu Yang's rebirth, his goal had been very simple: Mo Qing Wu, the Sword of Calamity. Find Mo Qing Wu, love her for life. Find the Sword of Calamity, and reach the peak. As for the mystery of his birth, in his previous life, he did not know about the purple crystal jade essence, and did not have any hope for the mystery of his birth. As for the sect, his feelings had always been very indifferent. But in this life, these two things had appeared in front of him at the same time. "Master, why did you say these things to me today?" Chu Yang pondered and said. "In the past, you have never mentioned it." Meng Chaoran smiled. He looked at the blood-red clouds in the sky and said lightly, "Beyond the Heavens sect has many disciples, but everyone who practices the sword is purely practicing the sword, that is all." He stopped talking for a long time, and then slowly said, "But I saw you practicing the sword today, practicing the sword, practicing the Jiang Hu." Chu Zhang was silent. Meng Chaoran looked at the rising sun in the sky, and let out a long, long breath. This breath was so long, as if it had been suppressed in his heart for dozens of years. He looked at the eyes of the sun with a strange expression, as if he was reminiscing, but also as if he was in pain, or disappointed. In short, his expression was very complicated, as if he was immersed in a dream, unable to extricate himself. Chu Zhang was silent for a while, and finally asked in a low voice, "Master just said that protecting Beyond the Heavens sect is only one of your biggest wishes. But what other wishes do you have?" If I have the chance, I will definitely do it for you. When he asked this, Meng Chao Ran's body trembled as if he had been electrocuted. His face suddenly turned pale, as if he had recalled some painful past. He stood there in a daze, his eyes filled with confusion and pain, but he did not say a word, as if he had turned into a statue. After a long time, as if in a dream, he said in a low voice, "Wind and rain cannot wash away the scars of the heart, the vicissitudes of life cannot extinguish the wounds of love. Do not speak lightly of the ancient times, only when separated can one see the desolation." His voice was very low, as if he was whispering, as if he was in a dream, as if he was crying. It was the kind of despair and helplessness that was suppressed to the point of eruption, but could not cry, an endless desolation. Hearing this voice in Chu Yang's ears, he clearly felt that his master had shattered his own heart in these short 20 words. This kind of feeling made Chu Yang suddenly think of the battle on the Wind Thunder platform in his previous life, when he was at the end of the road and had no hope of survival, and when he thought of Mo Ching Wu, that kind of sadness and heartbreak. Meng Chao Ran's current situation was actually similar to his own feelings of despair at that time. Could it be that Master had also experienced a life's regret? Presumably it was this matter that made Meng Chao Ran not care about anything, and did not care about anything, right? Wind and rain cannot wash away the scars of the heart, the vicissitudes of life cannot extinguish the wounds of love. Do not speak lightly of the ancient times, only when separated can one see the desolation. These were the first few lines of a poem that I wrote 3 years ago when I was lying on my sickbed. Outside the window, the storm was raging. I really liked these few lines. Meng Chao Ran's story was inspired by these 2 lines. Chapter 20. Chu Yang's heart shook. When he raised his head again, Meng Ran's bleak figure with his hands behind his back had already quietly disappeared from his sight. Before he left, he actually didn't say anything to him, not even a single word. But that oppressive aura seemed to linger here and didn't dissipate for a long time. Chu Yang was stunned for a while. He could faintly feel that Meng Ran's heart was very bitter, so bitter that he couldn't imagine it at all. What exactly happened to make this former genius of Beyond the Heavens sect become like this? If there was a chance, he would definitely untie this knot in his master's heart. Chu Yang took a deep breath. His eyes focused, and he pulled out his sword. Sword energy rushed to the heavens. This time, he practiced from the beginning to the end. He practiced every move over and over again. He had already practiced drawing and sheathing the sword. Now, he needs to practice the flow of the moves. He needs to combine the moves with the order of the moves. Then, he needs to understand it carefully, whether it was to protect Beyond the Heavens sect, to find Mo Ching Wu, or to fulfill his master's other unspoken wish. He must have strength. If he didn't have enough strength, he would only become a target for others to fulfill their wishes. As for the purple crystal marrow, Chu Yang just casually hung it around his neck. As long as he didn't use his vital energy, it was no different from an ordinary pendant. Chu Yang's plan was that unless he completed a stage of cultivation, he wouldn't use the recovery ability in the purple crystal marrow. Just as Meng Ran said, not only was it not beneficial, it was harmful. Relying too much on external forces was not a good thing. Only by piling up sweat and accumulating it bit by bit with one's heart would it be the most stable state and the deepest level of comprehension. If one blindly relied on external forces, even if one's strength increased, one would never reach the state. That would become one's life's regret, and it would never be able to make up for it. A martial great master had the mental state of a martial great master. Only after stopping at it, comprehending it, and completely mastering it, could one logically enter revered martial great master. A martial great master, even if a windfall fell from the sky and suddenly obtained 10,000 years of pure strength, but without the corresponding mental state and mental state to complement it, he wouldn't become a supreme martial great master. He would still be a martial great master. He would just be a more abnormal martial great master. Therefore, every step had to be firm and solid. How could being thrown to the peak by others and climbing to the peak by oneself be the same? If he was thrown up, he would fall to his death. Time passed quickly. During lunchtime, Chu Yang saw Shi Qianshan again. Right now, Shi Qianshan's complexion was ashen. He had no energy left. His face was full of worry and anxiety. Everyone knew that Li Jian's perverted behavior was not going to be forgotten so easily. As second martial uncle's disciple, even if it was just to flatter master, he still had to stand up for Li Jian. If they don't come now, it means those people are planning something, and it doesn't mean this matter is over. Tan Tan carelessly gnawed on the jelly. In fact, his hands were covered with oil. Chu Yang was in a good mood. So, he sat down and began to chew. Only Shi Qianshan had no appetite at all. He forced himself to eat, but the food tasted like wax. After a few bites, he sighed. His gloomy eyes constantly swept over Chu Yang. It seemed as if the faint anger in his eyes was about to burst out. Shi Qianshan, I heard that you are very powerful. It was said that he was the #1 expert of the younger generation. Haha, come out. Let's see and learn from each other. At this time, a clamor came from outside the door. Then, there was a burst of laughter. From the sound of it, there were at least 7 or 8 people. Yes. This Shi Qianshan actually called himself the #1 expert of the younger generation of Beyond the Heavens sect. He really doesn't know how to write the word death. #1 expert? Does Shi Qianshan deserve it? Quickly come out and beg for mercy. The troublemakers had finally come. The evil fruit that Chu Yang had planted for Shi Qianshan had exploded so early. Even Chu Yang did not expect this. Shi Qianshan's face became pale. Then, he fiercely looked at Chu Yang. #1 expert of the younger generation. These words were shouted by Chu Yang that day. At that time, Shi Qianshan was very proud of himself. But later, he realized that this was a quagmire that he could not get out of. But it was already too late. Now, hearing these words, it was like a knife cutting his heart. Wonderful irony! And it was also the biggest problem of Beyond the Heavens sect. Which of the current 5th generation disciples was not allergic to the word #1? The position of the eldest disciple. The ownership of 7 Shades congregation grounds. Li Jian's fellow disciples did not dare to openly come to find trouble and avenge Li Jian. But Chu Yang's words of #1 expert of the younger generation provided them with an excellent excuse. And the sect had always tacitly approved of this kind of competition between disciples. Shi Qianshan could imagine that there would be endless troubles coming to find him. Chu Yang lowered his head to eat, as if he did not hear the cursing outside and did not see Shi Qianshan's bitter gaze. But in his heart, he sneered, "Fuck, if I don't play you to death in this life, then I would be sorry for being reborn." The 8 young people outside were all dressed in black, but there was a red ribbon tied around their waists. On their cuffs, there was also a red ribbon. This was the symbol of the Locking Clouds Peak disciples. Just like Chu Yang's purple bamboo garden, it was a purple ribbon. At this moment, the 8 people were looking at Shi Qianshan. Their eyes were filled with anger. Li Jian was Li Jinsong's only son. Normally, he was spoiled. Naturally, he did not get along well with his fellow disciples. But it was one thing to not get along well with them. He was bullied by outsiders. Although these people's hearts were not necessarily unhappy, it did not prevent them from using this as an excuse to vent their anger for Li Jian. This was a great opportunity to flatter. So it is Senior Brother Lu and Senior Brother Chu who have personally come. Shi Qianshan did not go out to meet you. Although Shi Qianshan's face was ugly, he still respectfully bowed and said, "Shi Qianshan, I am not worthy of you calling me Senior Brother." Senior Brother Lu laughed and said sharply, "You are the #1 expert of the younger generation of Beyond the Heavens sect. With my insignificant cultivation, how could I dare to call you Senior Brother?" Sure enough, he used the title of #1 expert of the younger generation to talk. Shi Qianshan's face became even uglier. In his heart, he already hated Chu Yang to death. Now he suddenly remembered, could it be that when Chu Yang said those words, it was to give them an excuse? This Senior Brother Lu was about 30 years old. His name was Lu Yunyan. He was Li Jinsong's eldest disciple. As for senior brother Chu, his name was Chu Ping. He was 27 or 28 years old and ranked second. The remaining few people were all their junior brothers from the same sect. At this moment, hearing Lu Yunyan's words, they all roared with laughter. Shi Qianshan, come! Let me see the ability of the number one expert! Chu Ping stepped forward and looked at Shi Qianshan. How can I be senior brother Chu's opponent? Shi Qianshan hurriedly declined. What a joke! How could he dare to fight now? Among the 8 people, Lu Yunyan was ranked higher than him. Chu Ping and the other outsider, although they were slightly lower, they were not far off. The other party deliberately came to find trouble. How could he let him off so easily? If he fought, he would probably be beaten into a pig's head. As for Tan Tan and Chu Yang, their martial power was low and could not be relied on. He was equivalent to fighting 8 people. Shi Qianshan wanted to cry. Shi Qianshan did not fight, but it did not mean that Chu Ping was going to waste time with him. Suddenly, with a clang, his long sword was unsheathed. In the midst of a dazzling white light, there was a pa sound, followed by a pu sound, and then a pu sound. It turned out that Chu Ping did not give Shi Qianshan any chance to speak. He heavily slapped Shi Qianshan's face and kicked him in the stomach. This slap and kick were both powerful. Shi Qianshan did not dodge or avoid the attack. He only felt pain in his stomach and sat down on the ground. Shi Qianshan knew that as long as he did not fight back, being beaten by the opponent would not be a big deal. But if he fought back, it would be hard to say whether he could survive today. Therefore, facing the opponent's attack, he gritted his teeth and endured. This bastard dared to hit me! Chu Ping, who was the one who hit Shi Qianshan, shouted angrily. Fuck, it hurts! As expected of the number one expert of our Beyond the Heavens sect. Brothers, we are in imminent danger. Quickly come and save us. Oh no, second brother is at a disadvantage. Go! Quickly go and save second brother. Lu Yunyan's eyes flashed. He shouted in a very panicked manner. With a shout, immediately everyone rushed forward. They punched and kicked Shi Qianshan, who was on the ground, as if he was a punching bag. The wind whistled as the punches landed on his chest. As they hit him, they shouted, You dared to hit my second brother! We agreed on a fair fight. This Shi Qianshan actually used underhanded means. Beat this shameless person to death. There were even some people who shouted while fighting. Shi Qianshan, you are relying on the fact that this is the Purple Bamboo Garden. You stop. Second martial brother, are you all right? Listening to this voice, it seemed that Chu Ping was about to be beaten to death. Chu Ping gritted his teeth and kicked Shi Qianshan again and again. At the same time, he shouted miserably. It hurts! It hurts! Shi Qianshan, you are so vicious! On the ground, Shi Qianshan was still screaming and begging for mercy. But slowly, with a few cracking sounds, his body curled up and he fainted. The 7 people were still angry. After beating for a while, they finally stopped. Everyone was panting. Chu Ping wiped his sweat and said, That was close. I was almost killed by Shi Qianshan, yes. This Shi Qianshan is really vicious. Someone at the side echoed. Tan Tan's eyes were red. But when he was about to rush out, he was stopped by Chu Yang. The opponent had so many people. Even if Tan Tan rushed out, it would be useless. He could only be beaten up like Shi Qianshan. Moreover, Shi Qianshan being beaten up was such a delightful scene. How could he ruin it? Chapter 21. As Shi Qianshan's master, how could Meng Ran not come out to take a look? But right now, he was full of disappointment. When Meng Ran taught his disciples, he always had a principle: do your own thing. If you can't do it, I will help you. But you cannot do it. This was Meng Ran's principle. Today, if Shi Qianshan had a bit of backbone, a bit of manliness, he could really fight with the other side. Meng Ran would also immediately stand up for his little brother. Meng Ran could even directly fight in front of second martial brother's door. If your son is beaten, you need to find a reason. But if my disciple is beaten for nothing, is it for nothing? Meng Ran was already prepared. But looking at Shi Qianshan's slippery state, in order to save his life, he would rather be beaten than to fight back. If he is so cowardly, even if he is scheming, what can he do? If one day a strong enemy comes to attack, won't he have to kneel and surrender? There is a limit to enduring humiliation. I can stand up for you. But you need to have value for me to stand up for you. I can protect you for a while, but I can't protect you forever. You still have to go through the DNG and take responsibility for everything. This was Meng Ran's way of teaching his disciples. Although it was heartless, it was suitable for this. Jiang Hu. Courage. Courage. Although these two qualities were often said to be the path to death for young people, it was undeniable that without these two qualities, even if one lived for 10,000 years, it would be impossible to become a strong martial artist. Although he was lacking in courage, it was something he couldn't lack in order to become an expert of his generation. Meng Ran suddenly felt very disappointed with this little brother of his. So, he did not care anymore. In the purple bamboo forest, on the opposite side of Meng Ran, there were also two people looking at this farce with gloomy faces. These two people were Beyond the Heaven Sect Master Wu Yun Liang and Dream Cloud's Peak Master Kong Jingfeng? Why are they here? Moreover, he was actually watching a bunch of kids fight with relish? If Chu Yang knew that these two people were here, he would be very surprised. Looking at Shi Qianshan lying on the ground like a pile of mud, covered in blood and unconscious, Chu Ping and Lu Yunyan suddenly felt very bored. Originally, he thought that since Shi Qianshan was so arrogant and dared to hit Li Jian, it would be a fierce battle. Who would have thought that when they came here with great fanfare, they would encounter such a coward who actually allowed them to beat him up without even fighting back? He was worried that it would be bad if he killed him, so he prepared to leave. Just as he turned around and was about to walk back, a voice suddenly said slowly, "Hey, that I say, you're leaving just like that?" Lu Yunyan and the others stopped in their tracks. That person continued, "Cough, cough. You 8 martial brothers fought against Shi Qianshan, yet you suffered such a great loss. Don't you think it's a bit inappropriate to leave like this?" Lu Yunyan abruptly turned around and coldly stared at the person who had just spoken. In a dark voice, he asked, "You have a problem with that?" The other 7 people also turned around and looked at the young man who had suddenly appeared. They were all somewhat astonished. When Shi Qianshan was beaten up in front of him, he didn't even make a sound. Why did he come out now that the matter was over? Could it be that he also wanted to be beaten up? Chu Zhang gently smiled and said, "Senior Martial Brother Chu came to my purple bamboo garden, yet suffered such a great loss. I feel very apologetic in my heart." His usually cold face suddenly had this kind of warm and friendly smile. It actually made him look like a god. Tan Tan at the side opened his mouth wide. Looking at Chu Yang's smiling face, it was as if he had seen a ghost. Heavens, I, your brother, have lived for more than 10 years. Today, I actually saw Chu Zhang smile. My life was not in vain. Tan Tan's heart rose and fell. At this moment, he actually had the impulse to write a poem. On the other hand, Lu Yunyan and the others felt suffocated. Just a moment ago, these 8 people had ruthlessly beaten Shi Qianshan until he was half dead, yet their mouths were clamoring that they had suffered losses. It was as if it was Shi Qianshan who had single-handedly beaten the 8 of them. Now, as a member of the Purple Bamboo Garden, Chu Zhang was actually lying through his teeth. He inverted black and white, and went along with what they said. This made them feel extremely depressed. Chu Yang naturally did not stand up for Shi Qianshan. If this matter had happened somewhere else, he would have just watched from the sidelines, patted his butt, and left. However, since he was born in the Purple Bamboo Garden, Chu Zhang could not let them leave. This was his master's territory. This was Meng Ran's face. Gavin Cloud's Peak's younger brother beat up Meng Ran's younger brother in the Purple Bamboo Garden and then left as if nothing had happened. If this matter was spread out, one could imagine what kind of damage Meng Ran's reputation would receive. Of course, Meng Ran never cared about these things. However, Chu Yang could not ignore it. In his previous life, Meng Ran had always been the person Chu Yang respected the most. Since Shi Qianshan had already been beaten up according to his plan, then, it was time for him to counterattack. These people came to the Purple Bamboo Garden to beat people. They must pay the price. In Chu Yang's view, this was completely different from them beating up Shi Qianshan. I don't know if this is considered killing a donkey after it has outlived its usefulness? Chu Yang asked himself in his heart. He felt that he was being a little unreasonable. He could not help but rub his nose, sigh, unreasonable, so be it. Killing a donkey after it has outlived its usefulness is just a bunch of donkeys. Furthermore, he could use Shi Qianshan to block the disaster. However, the current situation was that he had to obtain the sword point in the shortest time possible. He had to step on these people to get to the top. Since he had to step on them sooner or later, what was the harm in stepping on them earlier? What do you mean? Lu Yunyan waved his hand to stop his junior brothers from stepping forward. He looked at Chu Yang with disdain. This person in front of him was at most a level 2 or 3 martial disciple. This kind of person, what kind of tricks could he play? There was no need to take it to heart. What I mean is, this is the Purple Bamboo Garden, not the Locking Clouds Peak. Chu Yang smiled warmly. However, his eyes shone like a blade. This is the Purple Bamboo Garden, so what? Lu Yunyan snorted. You are from the Locking Clouds Peak. Although we belong to the same sect, the Locking Clouds Peak is the Locking Clouds Peak. The Purple Bamboo Garden is the Purple Bamboo Garden, Chu Yang said indifferently. You came to the Purple Bamboo Garden to cause trouble. Did the sect elders allow you to do so? What do you mean by cause trouble? Chu Ping glared and said, We only came to exchange pointers with junior brother Shi Qianshan. Isn't it normal for fellow disciples to exchange pointers? Yes, exchange pointers. Only exchange pointers. The rest of the people shouted. The word causing trouble could not be used on them. Exchange pointers. Beyond the Heaven sect's rules state that when exchanging pointers, the sect elders must be present. Since we are exchanging pointers, where are the sect elders? Chu Yang sneered and said. Beyond the Heaven sect's rules state that when exchanging pointers, the sect elders must be present to change the ranking on the spot. Where is the ranking list? Beyond the Heaven sect's rules state that when exchanging pointers, there must be a contract. Where is the contract? You. Chu Ping was speechless. They came this time because they knew that Meng Ran was in the Purple Bamboo Garden. When the time came, they only needed to report to Meng Ran and request to exchange pointers. It could be considered that there was an elder present. Everything would fall into place. Moreover, it could also earn a good reputation for Locking Clouds Peak. Look, although we are exchanging pointers in name, we are actually helping our junior brother vent his anger. However, the location was chosen in the Purple Bamboo Garden. Moreover, the only sect elder present was Marshal Uncle Meng. Everything was carried out in front of his eyes, open and above board. Moreover, Li Jian had suffered such a big loss. If Locking Clouds Peak did not react, it would be strange. However, when they came here, they found that only Chu Yang and the other two were present. After a few words, they came to an impasse. Now that the fight was over, the other side stood up and demanded that everything be done according to the rules. Now, without an elder present, no matter what, this matter could not be justified. Nonsense! Today's matter was provoked by Shi Qianshan. He beat up my senior brother Chu. Senior brother Chu defended himself. That's why. One of the youths rolled his eyes and shouted rudely. Chu Yang looked at him coldly and said, If that's the case, then senior brother Chu is injured? His injury is not light? Of course. The youth's face turned red, but he said firmly, Look, senior brother Chu's waist is injured. There are also wounds on his chest. His whole body is covered with cuts and bruises. Oh? So, today was not a spar? Chu Yang tilted his head with interest. Your face is so red. Did you do something wrong? Of course it was not a spar. Chu Ping braced himself and said stutteringly. Just a moment ago, they were all shouting that it was a spar. However, under Chu Yang's sharp words, they immediately changed their words and said that it was not a spar. So, when you go back, you will say the same thing? Chu Yang asked with a smile. Of course, we will speak the truth. The sect has been very kind to us. How could we lie? When Chu Ping said this, his face could not help but turn red. But that's not very appropriate. Look, you've suffered such a big loss, but you don't even have a single injury on your body. Isn't that too unreasonable? Chu Yang said sincerely. Senior brother Chu, how about I help you? You help me? Chu Ping's pupils shrank. How can you help me? I can help you. I can make a few wounds on your body. Chu Yang smiled sincerely. Senior brother Chu, I am thinking for you. When you go back and tell the elders that you are not injured, they will definitely think that you are lying. Then, you will definitely be punished. How about you let me cut you a few times, punch you a few times, or kick you gently? What do you think? Ha! Chu Ping laughed and looked at Chu Yang with disdain. You are Chu Yang, right? Before we came, Junior Brotherly repeatedly told us that we can deal with Shi Qianshan, but we must leave Chu Yang to himself. Ha, that is why I let you go. Now you actually want to help me? Ha, with your insignificant skills, how can you help me? Whether I can help or not, I will have to try. Chu Yang said warmly. Maybe Senior Brother Chu will suddenly go crazy and stand still for me to hit. Wouldn't that be easy? Chapter 22. Hearing Chu Ping's question, the boys and girls behind him all laughed. Everyone knew that among the 8 peaks and 1 garden of Beyond the Heavens sect, the 8 peaks occupied the top 10 positions. Purple Bamboo Garden's oldest brother, Shi Qianshan, was only ranked 13th. As for the other 2 brothers, they were both ranked below the 700th rank. They were practically the last. Chu Yang Tan. Now, this unworthy person actually wanted to challenge Chu Ping, who was in the top 20. With a difference of more than 700 ranks, this was simply asking for death. Chu Yang also laughed. His laughter was very normal, but very cold. It was summer and the weather was hot, but when Chu Yang laughed, it was like a cold wind blowing down from the peak of a snowy mountain. Everyone felt cold all over. Chu Yang's eyes became cold as he slowly said, Purple Bamboo Garden's prestige is not something you can offend. The rules of Beyond the Heavens sect are not something you can break. Chu Ping, today, I will use you to establish my prestige. Sooner or later, I will step on these people and become the number 1 brother. Then, today will be the beginning. Today's battle will be the first battle of my rise in Beyond the Heavens sect. I, Chu Yang, have always stood at the top of the wind and welcomed other people's challenges. Now, after my rebirth, although I am at the bottom, my bones are still at the top. It is lonely at the top. A 3rd-level martial disciple wants to establish his prestige by challenging a 2nd-level martial warrior? Without a doubt, this matter was a huge joke. The people behind Chu Ping immediately roared with laughter. They looked at Chu Yang as if they were looking at an idiot. Trash, you want to establish your prestige? And you want to use Senior Brother Chu to establish your prestige? Are you crazy? This guy is crazy. Junior Brother Chu, you and Chu Yang fight. Lu Yunyan, who had led the team, stared at Chu Yang's eyes and slowly said, Don't underestimate your opponent. His cultivation was higher than Chu Ping's, and his spiritual perception was also much sharper. Previously, when Chu Yang came out, he was smiling and talking, so he did not feel anything. But now that Chu Yang's aura had changed, Lu Yunyan suddenly felt a cold pressure on his face. The contempt in Lu Yunyan's heart suddenly disappeared without a trace, like a snowflake encountering the scorching sun. At this moment, the way he looked at Chu Yang was simply a little frightened. As soon as Lu Yunyan said the words "Don't underestimate the enemy," the surrounding laughter suddenly disappeared. This clearly indicated that Lu Yunyan was not optimistic about Chu Ping's chances in the battle between Chu Yang and Chu Ping. Lu Yunyan was one of the top 10 disciples of the Beyond the Heaven sect's 5th generation. Although he was at the bottom, his strength was already extraordinary. He was already a grade 4 martial warrior. Such a person would naturally have a discerning eye. Although Chu Ping was only a 2nd grade martial warrior, compared to Chu Yang, who was a 3rd grade martial disciple, the difference was like heaven and earth. Warrior against martial disciple, elite against trash. Was there any suspense in this battle? Chu Yang smiled calmly. He took a step forward and said, "Chu Ping, come! Come and get from me the reason why you got away with lying!" Chu Ping roared and suddenly pounced forward, throwing out a punch. His movements were agile, just like a leopard on the hunt. He saw that Chu Yang did not take out a weapon, so he was naturally embarrassed to draw his sword first. Chu Yang was about to move when his eyes suddenly flashed. At this moment, he had a feeling that he was being spied on. It was as if his every move was being watched by someone in the dark. This was the strong spiritual sense that he had cultivated in his previous life. This spiritual sense had helped him escape countless life and death situations. Today, this feeling rose again. However, he could not feel the killing intent of the person in the dark. It seemed that there was no malicious intent. Chu Yang's heart was moved. He already had some guesses about the identity of the person in the dark. He thought to himself, since this is a heaven-sent opportunity, I might as well give you a surprise. He did not look around. His face was expressionless, but his footwork had already begun, and he rushed towards Chu Ping. His movements were obviously normal, but in the eyes of others, it was indescribably strange. Chu Yang's upper body did not move, but his body also seemed to be rushing forward. However, Chu Ping found that even after rushing a few feet, he still could not touch Chu Yang's clothes. In the eyes of others, Chu Yang's body was clearly charging forward. But in reality, he was retreating. He looked like he was really in an offensive state, but his basic movements were really dodging. Under his feet, his 2 feet maintained the posture of taking large strides forward, moving nimbly. This strange phenomenon completely subverted everyone's understanding. In the bamboo forest, Meng Ran opened his mouth wide. He was about to cry out in surprise, but he suddenly realized something and closed his mouth. His upper and lower teeth clenched together, and with a smacking sound, Meng Ran felt a sharp pain in his cheeks. But Meng Ran did not feel it at all. He only opened his eyes wide, looking at Chu Yang, who was moving around freely like flowing water. His eyes were full of shock. At the same time, in the bamboo forest on the other side, 2 cold gasps could be heard. The sound was so loud that it almost sucked their surroundings into a vacuum. Chu Yang's dodging action immediately caused the 3 people who were watching from the shadows to be extremely shocked. The 3 people stared at Chu Yang's movements without blinking, their eyes full of passion. Snow in the clouds, graceful in the sky, advancing and retreating, advancing and returning. Everyone present was very familiar with this set of footwork. Beyond the Heaven sects. Fleeting snow cloud footwork. Every generation of disciples practiced it, and everyone knew it. Even the servants who boiled water could use it a few times. But no one had ever been able to achieve the effect that Chu Yang had. Fleeting snow cloud footwork was created by the founder of Beyond the Heavens sect. That year, this founder was on the peak of a mountain, bathing in the rare warm sunlight of winter. He was about to rest, but when he lay down, he saw that the clouds in the sky were pure white, and the color of the snow on the ground was also reflected by the sunlight, shooting into the sky. The snow and the clouds reflected each other, and were unexpectedly ever-changing. There was no wind in the sky, but the clouds in the sky seemed to be moving forward, and also seemed to be retreating, and also seemed to be spreading, and also seemed to be condensing. It was impossible to see whether it was moving forward or backward, but when he looked, the clouds had unknowingly moved away. This founder seemed to have understood something, and buried his head in thought. 2 years later, he created a set of footwork, and named it Fleeting Snow Cloud Footwork, to commemorate the inspiration that the heavens and earth gave him. This founder used this set of footwork to run rampant in the world, and when combined with sword moves, he rarely lost. It could be said that his fame was illustrious. Even enemies who were far more powerful than him would not be able to hurt him. But after him, no one could learn this set of fleeting snow cloud footwork. Even if they used their own internal energy to cultivate, they could not achieve the same effect as the founder. It could not attack the enemy, nor could it protect oneself. Instead, it became a martial art. It was useless to practice it, but it was a pity to abandon it. Everyone thought that the founder must have made a mistake. Or it could be said that he did not leave behind the true secret. This matter became one of Beyond the Heavens sect's biggest regrets. But they did not expect that after a few hundred years, the true essence of this set of footwork would reappear on Chu Yang. How did he do it? Chu Ping crazily attacked, but he could not even touch the corner of Chu Yang's clothes. The more he fought, the angrier he became. He was a second-level martial warrior, but he could not beat a third-level martial disciple? His martial brothers were all watching from the side. How could he lose so much face? Chu Ping was flustered and exasperated. He was just about to pull out his sword, but when he pulled back his hand, a shadow flashed in front of him, and Chu Yang was already in front of him. Chu Ping was shocked, and before he could dodge, he heard a bang sound as his nose was punched. Blood immediately flowed from his nose, and under the pain of his nose, tears flowed out. "Be good, don't cry, I am doing this for your own good." Chu Yang gently comforted him, but his hands were merciless. His body flashed like a fish, and with two bang sounds, Chu Ping's left eye and right eye were both heavily punched. Chapter 23. Chu Ping was so angry that he almost fainted. His opponent's martial power was not as good as his. If his martial power was the same as his, he would have been knocked down to the ground by those 3 punches. His opponent's 3 punches clearly contained his full strength. But he only suffered superficial wounds. This proved that his opponent's martial power was not high. His opponent was much weaker than him. But he was at a disadvantage. What kind of logic was this? Chu Ping was furious. His opponent's words were as if he was coaxing a child. But he actually shed tears. This made him so ashamed that he wanted to die. With a loud roar and a clang, his sword was unsheathed. The wind whistled. His first move was a killing move. Lu Yunyan shouted in his heart. "Not good!" Although he did not understand what was going on, but looking at the current situation, Chu Yang's footwork was exquisite, and Chu Ping's mind was in a mess. He was definitely not his opponent. This move of his had placed him in an extremely dangerous situation. If he did not attack, his opponent would not attack either. In that case, even if he were to suffer a few punches and kicks, with his martial arts that were much stronger than his opponent's, suffering a few punches would be completely harmless, and nothing major would happen. But when he drew his sword, his opponent could naturally draw his sword as well. At that time, it would not be as simple as suffering a few punches and kicks. Silver light flashed, sword shadows swayed. Chu Ping's face was dark, and his face was full of murderous intent. He madly rushed forward. Chu Yang's eyes revealed a trace of murderous intent. "Although you are not a good person, you beat up Shi Qianshan. This made my mood very good. I originally thought that I would not be too harsh on you, but you actually want to kill me? You are courting death." Chu Yang was still empty-handed. He constantly moved and dodged the sword shadows. Chu Ping's sword was like falling petals, but it could not even touch the corner of his clothes. But a biting cold murderous intent was growing stronger and stronger. Chu Ping shouted and suddenly leaped up, his sword flashing as he descended from the sky. Inverted Milky Way. This was one of the sword techniques of Beyond the Heavens sect. It was a powerful killing move. Only those who had entered the ranks of martial warriors were qualified to practice this set of sword techniques. Chu Yang snorted. His body suddenly moved forward instead of retreating. He lowered his body and jumped out close to the ground. This was the fatal flaw of the inverted heavenly river move. Due to the leap, the lower body would be empty, and there would be a lot of space. When Chu Ping made his move, he saw that there was no trace of his opponent in front of him. Just as he was thinking that something was wrong, he suddenly heard a soft sound behind him. What was that sound? Behind him, where he couldn't see, there was a flash of sword light. Chu Yang had not drawn his sword all this time, but at this critical moment, he drew his sword. Just as Chu Ping was pondering, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. Following that, his left leg, left shoulder, and right shoulder felt excruciating pain at the same time. Chu Ping screamed and fell from the sky. Fresh blood spurted out from his back, left shoulder, left leg, and right leg. Apart from the wound on his back that only pierced his flesh, the rest of his body was pierced with holes from the back to the front. Absolute silence. Everyone recognized this move of Chu Yang's. It was just an ordinary move of backhand 5 plum blossoms. It was the introductory sword technique of Beyond the Heavens sect. It was nothing special. It was used to strengthen the body and build the foundation. But the problem was, the timing of this sword strike was simply too perfect. Just as Chu Ping was about to jump up and strike down like a thunderbolt, Chu Yang was already behind him. Without looking back, Chu Yang backhand 5 plum blossoms was like a practice target. Every strike was as accurate as a textbook. Chu Yang's movements were light, and he took the initiative. Coupled with his fast movements, his sword was almost silent. The friction between the sword and the scabbard only made a slight sound. Chu Ping did not expect that this sound was the sound of a sword being unsheathed. Moreover, all of his attention was focused on what was in front of him. Who would have thought that the enemy would be behind him in an instant? Chu Ping screamed. He desperately turned his body and threw his sword behind him. Now he did not want to win. He only wanted to die together with his opponent. The sword was like a ray of light, flashing by. But it did not hit its target. It flew straight into the purple bamboo forest. No one on the scene cared about where the sword flew to. But Kong Jingfeng, who was in the purple bamboo forest, was enjoying the show. At the same time, he was thinking about Chu Yang's fleeting snow cloud steps. He did not have time to react. The sword was already in front of him. With a sound, it pierced through his robe and nailed to the ground. Kong Jingfeng stared dumbfoundedly at the small half of the shining sword. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His eyeballs almost fell to the ground. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. In an instant, even his back was cold. The long sword was right between his legs. It was less than a finger's distance away from the man's vital part. Even his underwear was pierced through. The lump in his crotch was desperately curled up into a ball, but he could still feel the cold intent of the long sword. Kong Jingfeng's face was pale. Finally, he could not help but whisper, This is really a blessing from the heavens." Chu Yang twisted his body and dodged the long sword flying towards him. Activating his fleeting snow cloud steps, he closed in on Chu Ping like a flash of lightning. His right palm suddenly emitted a gloomy and cold fog. With a bone-chilling coldness, he struck Chu Ping's back with lightning speed. Bang! It was a solid hit. With one hit, Chu Yang spun around and was already standing 3 feet away. The moment the palm hit, the 3 people in the purple bamboo forest could clearly see the cold air coming out of Chu Yang's palm. At the same time, they widened their eyes and opened their mouths. They almost screamed out loud. Chu Ping flew into the air like a rubber ball. Then, he fell to the ground like a lump of rotten meat. He screamed out loud. His whole body was in so much pain that it spasmed. He rolled around on the ground and was sweating profusely. When he was in the air, blood was still spurting out. But the moment he landed, his body was covered with a layer of white frost at a speed visible to the naked eye. An inexplicable cold air froze his wounds. Blood could not flow out. Seeing Chu Ping rolling on the ground in such a miserable state, Lu Yunyan and the others were dumbfounded. They felt as if they were dreaming. No one would have thought that Chu Yang's sword would be so ruthless. The palm at the back did not matter. But the sword at the front was equivalent to crippling Chu Ping. A faint smile flashed across Chu Yang's face. He was forced to use the sword. But the fleeting snow cloud movement technique and the palm had an ulterior motive. The movement technique was for Chu Ping to dodge, but it was for someone in the dark to see. The goal of that palm strike, and the frigid energy contained within, was the Seven Shades Congregation Grounds. Seven Shades Absolute God Palm. It was a secret technique of Beyond the Heavens sect. It was also the most powerful martial technique. The main reason for the successive sect masters to enter the Seven Shades congregation was to use the extreme cold of the Seven Shades to practice the Seven Shades Absolute God Palm. When Chu Yang used the palm, it was not to attack Chu Ping. At that time, Chu Ping had already lost the ability to resist. What was the use of another palm? The real reason was to tell the person in the dark that he was one step ahead of the others. As for why he was one step ahead, Chu Yang believed that his master, Meng Chao Ran, would naturally clean up his mess. He had absolute confidence in this. Chu Yang, you are so vicious! Lu Yunyan looked at Chu Ping, who was writhing on the ground in pain. His eyes twitched. Then, he raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. He gnashed his teeth and said, "You dare to be so cruel to your fellow disciple!" Chu Yang sneered. His long sword was slanted. On the tip of the sword, a drop of blood slowly dripped down. Looking at the direction of the sword tip, it was the unconscious Shi Qianshan. Everyone was speechless. Chu Ping was a fellow disciple. Was Shi Qianshan not? After all, they were the ones who struck first. They had beaten Shi Qianshan into such a state. With the example of their predecessors, how could they blame Chu Yang for being merciless? Chu Yang smiled coldly and said, "First, it was you who came to Purple Bamboo Garden to cause trouble without the permission of the sect. Second, it was you who beat up the people of my Purple Bamboo Garden first. Third, everyone had already said clearly that I was only helping senior brother Chu. Everyone can't be so forgetful, right? Help, help." Looking at the badly mutilated Chu Ping, who had lost half of his life, everyone could not help but shudder. Help, help like this. Chapter 24. Sai, to tell you the truth, regarding the matter of senior brother Li Jian 2 days ago, us three brothers are also very guilty. Chu Yang let out a long sigh and said emotionally, "Therefore, regarding your visit today, our senior brother did not resist and allowed you to vent your anger. It can be considered as giving you an excuse for that matter," he said resentfully. "But you should not have caused trouble in Purple Bamboo Garden like this, and be so arrogant. Let me ask you, by doing this, where is the prestige of Purple Bamboo Garden? We are all from the same sect. The Red Flower Mantis is a family. Why do you have to be so bitter?" Chu Yang's expression unexpectedly became very sad and angry. "Hitting people is fine, but you still want to pretend to be the victim. You! How can you be so shameless?" When these words came out, everyone in front of him was dumbfounded and almost vomited blood. The three people in Purple Bamboo Garden who were secretly watching also suddenly felt their blood rushing to their heads. How can a person be so shameless to this extent? Even if you took advantage of others, you should not act like this. You see, my martial arts have easily defeated Chu Ping. Then what about my senior brother Shi Qianshan's martial arts? He is many times stronger than me," Chu Yang angrily said. "Senior brother's martial arts are far superior to yours, but he did not resist and let you vent your anger. What else do you want? Do you have to kill him?" When these words came out, Lu Yunyan and the others looked at the unconscious Shi Qianshan with fear in their eyes. "That's right, junior brother's martial arts have already reached perfection. As senior brother Shi Qianshan, how can he be weak? It seems that in this competition for the position of senior brother, Shi Qianshan will become a strong opponent for everyone. Today, you hurt one of my people, and I also helped you a lot. Although we suffered some losses, I've returned evil for good. Moreover, we are all from the same sect, what can't be done? This matter, why don't we just let it go like this?" Chu Yang said magnanimously. "For the sake of second martial uncle, I won't haggle over this matter. Lu Yunyan and the others only saw stars in front of their eyes. He almost couldn't breathe and fainted on the spot. You've already beaten him until he's half dead, and you actually have the face to say let's just let this matter go. Furthermore, you're speaking in a tone as if you've given him a great grace, and you're actually doing it for the sake of second martial uncle. Of course, if you senior brothers and junior brothers also want me to help, I won't refuse. I have always believed that helping others is a virtue. I have always remembered the teachings of this sect. Chu Yang smiled guiltily. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I'm just like this. I'm used to helping others. I'll help others when they're in need, and I'll help others when they're in trouble. Especially for my fellow disciples of the same sect. We're all one family. I'll help them even if I have to sacrifice my life. Lu Yunyan and the rest looked at Chu Ping on the ground and shuddered violently. You're helping me? Help your ass. We're not stupid. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Lu Yunyan's face. It was obvious that they were waiting for his decision. But Lu Yunyan was in a difficult position. Although he was ranked in the top 10, and his martial power was far above Chu Ping's, after watching Chu Yang's battle, he knew that he was definitely not Chu Yang's opponent. Such a strange way of fighting, if it were him, he would also suffer a great loss. If he were to step forward and also be defeated, then it would be a heavy blow to his sect that would be unbearable. Plus, he couldn't afford to lose face like this. Asterisk. Chu Yang, good move. Today's matter, let's just let it go. Lu Yunyan thought for a moment, and made a prompt decision. He said gloomily, the mountains don't move, the water moves. The 8th generation of Beyond the Heavens Sect's ranking tournament is about to begin. At that time, our gathering Clouds Peak and Purple Bamboo Garden will meet. At that time, we'll fight it out in front of the entire sect. Let's go. The 7 people picked up Chu Ping and went back the way they came. Before they left, they looked at Chu Yang's eyes, but there was a different meaning. Fear, dread, everyone was fighting in the same sect, who would really be ruthless. Even if they hit Shi Qianshan, they would still have a sense of propriety. They wouldn't kill him, nor would they cripple him. They would only break a few ribs, and let him suffer a little to avenge their own people. But when Chu Yang attacked, his hands and feet were pierced. This kind of determination and ruthlessness was a method that no one dared to use. Chu Yang looked at the 7 people's figures as they left. His face was very gloomy, and his eyes were very heavy. In this battle, Chu Yang had obtained a complete victory. His victory was indisputable. But no one knew that Chu Yang had found his own weakness in this battle. In this battle, Chu Yang relied completely on his skills and experience. Chu Yang's skills and experience were decades ahead of Lu Yunyan, Chu Ping, and the others. Every time his opponent made a move, he was able to take a step ahead of them and take the initiative to counter them. He had the absolute advantage. Chu Yang had always thought that although their martial power was higher than his, with his experience and skills, defeating them was absolutely not difficult. But in this battle, he knew that he was wrong. Skills and experience were not everything. For example, when Chu Ping attacked with his sword in a rage, Chu Yang knew that as long as he put his finger 3 or 4 fingers behind the tip of the sword, he would be able to push the sword to one side, leaving him wide open. Then he would step forward and fiercely kick his dantian. In fact, he did so. But when his finger touched it, and even half of his palm touched it, he fiercely tried to push it away, but it did not move at all. Although Chu Ping was only a 2nd-level martial warrior, he was much stronger than Chu Yang, a 3rd-level martial disciple. With Chu Yang's martial power, even if he used his skills to break it, he would not be a match for Chu Ping. So Chu Yang was forced to use his sword. Because with his martial power, he could not cause any harm to Chu Ping with his fists and feet. From an outsider's point of view, Chu Yang's fleeting snow cloud movement technique was ever-changing and his movements were elegant and graceful. It seemed that he had plenty of time to deal with Chu Ping. However, no one knew that Chu Yang's heart was heavy. Even Chu Ping himself did not know how many times Chu Yang had tested him and changed his strategy in this short fight. Being able to force Chu Yang to use his sword was already Chu Ping's pride. Even after using his sword, Chu Yang did not dare to show mercy. Once he showed mercy, he would suffer from the opponent's crazy counterattack. At that time, he would have already used his sword and would not be able to block it. Fleeting snow cloud steps, when practiced to a proficient level, once used, others would not be able to attack him. But when he attacked others, there would definitely be a flaw. Chu Ping could not grasp such an opportunity, but it did not mean that others could not. Dodging was absolutely ingenious, but blindly dodging would never allow one to win. The only way to win was to attack. But once he attacked, he could not maintain a flawless state. There would definitely be a flaw. Everything was mutual. When you attacked the opponent's vital point, your own vital point would also be under the opponent's attack. Chu Yang's heart trembled. His eyes flashed with eagerness. Power! Power was the most important thing. Skills were only useful when used against opponents of the same level, or not too different. But in the face of absolute power, skills were a joke. And power was what Chu Yang lacked the most right now. Tan Tan stood on the side, watching in a daze. At this moment, he suddenly shouted excitedly, "Chu Yang, you are really too handsome." After thinking for a while, he added, "Except that you are a little bit worse than me, handsome, humph humph." Chu Yang snorted. "Tan Tan, from tomorrow onwards I will wake you up every morning to practice martial arts with me. I hope that one day, I will also be as handsome as you." Tan Tan's face suddenly became bitter. He bitterly said, You are more handsome than me, is that not enough?" Chu Yang smiled and said, Tan Tan, you see, the current beyond the heavens sect is full of people who bully the weak and fear the strong. They can be provoked, but can't be supported. Now, the sect is about to start a big competition. We will choose the successor of Beyond the Heavens sect from these people. Chu Yang's voice was slightly louder. It seemed that he was deliberately saying this for someone to hear. His tone was thick with ridicule. He sneered as if he was referring to something. The heavy burden of Beyond the Heavens sect will fall on these people sooner or later. But can these people protect Beyond the Heavens sect? I am afraid that the destruction of the sect is right in front of them. Tan Tan, I hope that you can stand up and protect yourself. Don't be implicated by others and lose your life. Chapter 25. Tan Tan didn't understand what Chu Yang meant when he saw that Chu Yang had suddenly become so serious. But he still nodded in confusion. Chu Yang smiled slightly and carried Shi Qianshan with Tan Tan, walking through the door. Shi Qianshan was still unconscious. He did not know anything about what happened afterwards. He also did not know that after this battle, he had become famous among the younger brothers of Beyond the Heavens sect. After Lu Yunyan and the others returned, they immediately spread the news. Shi Qianshan had hidden his strength well, and was a formidable opponent of this generation's 10 great brothers. As a junior brother, Chu Yang could defeat Chu Ping, then as a senior brother, Shi Qianshan, what about him? After seeing Chu Ping's injuries, the 8th-generation younger brothers who were eyeing the position of the 10 great brothers covetously immediately listed Shi Qianshan as a dangerous person. Fire, theft, Shi Qianshan, 3 defenses. The muddle-headed Shi Qianshan would never have thought that he would actually become a big shot of Beyond the Heavens sect while he was muddle-headed. It could be seen that nothing was absolute in this world, and a person's fame was full of opportunities. Who knew when his fame would spread far and wide? Chu Yang's keen intuition had already sensed that there was definitely someone watching this scene in the bamboo forest. Although he did not know who it was, he was certain that it was the upper echelon of Beyond the Heavens sect. His master Meng Ran was definitely there, and he was only one of them. Therefore, when Chu Yang said those thoughtless words to Tan Tan, the meaning of those words was naturally to warn Tan Tan, but in the ears of those 3 people, it had a different meaning. Beyond the Heavens sect could not be supported by these useless people. But I, Chu Yang, can do it. Since he had decided to seize the position of the eldest brother, and enter 7 Shades congregation grounds to obtain the Calamity Sword, then his words and actions must be known by the upper echelons. Otherwise, he could only be like in his previous life, waiting until 4 years later when Beyond the Heavens sect was destroyed to obtain it. What was the point of that? Since he had openly entered the eyes of the upper echelons, then even if he wanted to be Loki, he could not. He might as well make his intentions clear, pat his chest, and say, to revitalize Beyond the Heavens sect and protect the sect, if not me, then who? Crazy? Yes, this time I will be crazy. What? Chu Yang and Tan Tan went in for a long time. Then, the bamboo forest slowly swayed. Then, 3 figures miraculously appeared in the purple sea. Each of them had a pensive look in their eyes. Chu Yang's last few words seemed to be implying something. Meng Ran moved and silently appeared in front of the 2 of them. He smiled and said, "Eldest senior brother, 7th senior brother, you came to the purple bamboo garden in such a low-key manner. You really surprised me." One of them was the sect master of Beyond the Heavens sect, Wu Yunliang, and the other was the master of Dream Cloud's Peak, Kong Jingfeng. But Kong Jingfeng's face is still pale. There's a hole in his crotch, and the wind is blowing in. This peak master of Dream Clouds had no choice but to clamp his legs together. It's a weird position. We should be the ones who are truly shocked. Wu Yunliang snorted and said, "Junior Marshal Brother O, it's fine if you keep a low profile, but you didn't even tell me that you taught such a talented Junior Marshal Brother? Just now, I was almost scared to death by your disciple." Kong Jingfeng nodded repeatedly, showing his approval of Wu Yunliang's words. He added, "Especially me, I was scared out of my wits." There was a hint of hidden bitterness in his words. Chu Yang's performance just now, no matter what, was enough to surprise these 2 experts of Beyond the Heavens sect. It was even shocking. The fleeting snow cloud footwork that was as agile as a swimming dragon, as graceful as a swan, as the fleeting snow cloud footwork that came and went like a ghost, as well as the killing blow that came and went like a ghost. His calm handling of the situation, and his ability to grasp the right timing, all of these made these 2 important people of Beyond the Heavens sect extremely surprised. The 2 of them asked themselves, if they had the same martial power as Chu Yang and were in the same situation today, they would not have been able to do what Chu Yang did so easily. This junior martial brother of Meng Ran's was incredible. Meng Ran smiled bitterly and said, "You guys were only shocked to the point of almost falling to the ground. Junior Marshal Brother O, on the other hand, was so shocked that his teeth were about to fall to the ground. You guys see, my eyes are red, but I still can't believe that such a monster appeared in my sect." As he said this, he rolled his eyes with a gloomy face. Wu Yunliang and Kong Jingfeng both laughed. Suddenly, Kong Jingfeng was shocked as he understood Meng Ran's meaning. "You are saying that your disciples' martial arts were not taught by you?" Meng Ran rolled his eyes. He wanted to deny it, but in the end, he sighed and said, "I taught him all this, but even I am afraid." Only then did the 2 turn pale with fright. Since Chu Yang was able to learn something that others could not, then there was only one explanation: talent. Unparalleled talent. Wu Yunliang originally thought that Meng Ran had grasped the true cultivation method of the fleeting snow cloud footwork, and was full of joy. Hearing Meng Ran's words, he was stunned. After a while, he stuttered, "Could it be that the fleeting snow cloud footwork?" Meng Ran nodded and said, "I did not learn it myself." Wu Yunliang and Kong Jingfeng were both stunned. Could it be that he learned it himself? Wu Yunliang twirled his beard. His hand trembled, almost pulling out a strand of hair. "I don't know." Meng Ran sighed. "But this disciple of mine is extremely intelligent. I don't know if he learned it himself." The 2 of them were shocked speechless. Meng Ran spread out his hands and shrugged his shoulders, making a helpless expression. Normally, the 3 of them were very serious in front of the other disciples, but in private, they were very relaxed. "No matter what, these 3 disciples of yours." Wu Yunliang pondered for a while, then said, "They really have an amazing talent." Saying this, he smiled bitterly and said, "With this guy's cultivation, he definitely would not have noticed that I was peeping here." But his last few words were clearly directed at me, the sect leader. Until now, I still do not understand why it was like this. Yes, they have a genius, but they also have a trash. Meng Ran said this with a strange expression. He did not like Shi Qianshan, but he did not like Shi Qianshan's way of doing things. It did not mean that he did not like Shi Qianshan as a person. In Meng Ran's heart, he did not have any hope for Shi Qianshan. Defeating the enemy fair and square is a victory, but using underhanded tactics to kill the enemy, is that not a victory? The only difference is the process. Maybe Shi Qianshan can walk the path of Jiang Hu's underhanded schemes. But today, Shi Qianshan could have fought, but he was afraid of the opponent and did not fight back. This made Meng Ran's last hope for him extinguish. A hero can be low-key, but a coward will never become a strong person. Trash? You mean Shi Qianshan? Wu Yunliang's eyes flashed with disdain. He smiled noncommittally. It seemed that this Beyond the Heaven sect leader did not have a good impression of Shi Qianshan. Meng Ran sighed slightly. Beyond the Heaven sect has nearly 800 disciples. Which sect does not have a few unworthy disciples? Junior Marshal brother, you do not need to take it to heart. After the first round of elimination, talents will always stand out. Mediocre or trash, they will all become a pile of bones. Wu Yunliang's eyes were deep. He slowly said, Junior Marshal brother, having Chu Yang as your disciple is enough to make up for all your regrets. Your second brother Chu Yang's methods are ruthless, decisive, and meticulous. What's rarest is that he's able to say that it's not right. Moreover, he's able to speak with conviction and confidence. He's a rare talent. He's not simple. Kong Jingfeng nodded deeply, expressing his agreement. Today, the two of them came together to see what Li Jinsong's brothers were going to do. However, their main purpose was to see the hole that tripped Li Jian up. Once again, he calculated the position to be completely sure. Was it true that Beyond the Heaven sect had produced such a genius, whose mind and methods were all first class? After listening to Wu Qianqian's report, they already suspected that Chu Yang was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? But for an 8th-generation disciple to have such a keen eye and rich experience, the two of them still did not believe it. That was why they came to investigate. But today, seeing Chu Yang deal with Chu Ping, the two of them understood. There was no need to investigate. It was definitely him. This guy called Chu Yang was definitely a dangerous person. The current Beyond the Heaven sect had internal and external troubles. They really needed talents. Especially talents from the younger generation. That was why Wu Yunliang valued Chu Yang. And what Chu Yang wanted was this kind of respect. Otherwise, why would he spend so much effort on it? Chapter 26. When Meng Ran heard Wu Yunliang praising Chu Yang, he was feeling complacent. But when he heard Wu Yunliang's words, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, Eldest Marshal brother, you are really in the mood. At this time, you are still talking nonsense. You can't make me cry, right? Wu Yunliang's mouth seemed to be witty, but his face was very serious. He slowly said, This Chu Yang, you need to train him well. Our Beyond the Heaven sect has too few people like him. Meng Ran nodded and sighed. There is nothing we can do about it. Ever since we were stripped of our title as the Great Zhao Empire's National Protector sect, we have lost a lot of strength. We have no one in the court, the government discriminates against us, and the other sects bully us. Even if we have a few talents, they are either taken away or killed on the spot. Beyond the Heaven sect is already in a precarious situation. If we cannot protect our own talents, I am afraid that after our generation, Beyond the Heaven sect will no longer exist. Meng Ran's words were a serious reminder and warning. Wu Yunliang's gloomy face revealed a bitter smile. He looked at Kong Jingfeng and said with a smile, You are the youngest. Are you afraid that we will sell off your favorite disciples? Meng Ran snorted and said, We have to be careful. The current Beyond the Heaven sect is no longer the same as before. Wu Yunliang sighed and said, I know that you have always been dissatisfied with the martial arts competition of the sect's younger disciples. It is true that Beyond the Heavens sect is declining day by day. Holding this kind of competition is undoubtedly exposing our outstanding disciples to the enemy. It increases the chances of them dying, but this is something we have to do. Meng Ran clasped his hands behind his back and snorted softly. You just want to maintain the customs of Beyond the Heavens sect. If you cannot make up your mind to change, what is the point of us talking about it? Meng Ran had always been calm. Wu Yunliang had only heard such a cold tone a few times in the dozens of years that they had been in the same sect. Hearing him say this, he knew that junior martial brother was dissatisfied. Slightly sighing, Wu Yunliang said seriously, If I want to change, it is only a matter of a few words from me. The reason why I still maintain the sect's rules is because I want to refine real gold in a fire. Wu Yunliang's face became cold. He slowly said, The 8th generation of Beyond the Heavens sect has 800 disciples. Our 7th generation has 70. There were less than 10 people left in the 1st generation of masters and martial uncles. As for the 5th generation ancestral master, the only one left is martial granduncle. The muscles on his face twitched as he clenched his teeth and said, If my plan succeeds, then of the 1,000 people of Beyond the Heavens sect, there will not be more than 100 people left. And those people will be the cornerstone of our Beyond the Heavens sect's glory. I don't want trash. I don't want mediocrity. Wu Yunliang slowly paced back and forth. His voice was low and deep, but it was like thunder and lightning striking down on people's souls. Even I, Wu Yunliang, will sacrifice myself when the time comes. The decline of a sect is not a reason for the suppression of various parties. Our Beyond the Heavens sect is an example of this. Wu Yunliang said seriously. But the rise of a sect requires blood and fire. Rise from the ashes. Meng Ran sighed. These outstanding disciples, in the eyes of the enemy, will naturally bring them countless dangers, but at the same time, countless opportunities. Only by breaking through all of this can they become pillars of the sect. Wu Yunliang said casually, If we can't break through and are completely annihilated, then there will be no Beyond the Heavens sect in this world. I don't want to struggle at death's door, I want to dance alone. Kong Jingfeng nodded deeply and said, Eldest martial brother is right. Living an ignoble life is not as good as dying heroically in battle. Meng Ran's eyes suddenly narrowed. Eldest martial brother, the decline of our sect is related to the imperial court of Great Xiao. Now that you have such a plan to revive our sect, doesn't that mean, that's right? Wu Yunliang's face was gloomy. In these 10 years, when I was not in the sect, I was always in Iron Cloud Nation. Even if Great Xiao suppressed us, we might not have to rely on Great Xiao. Great Xiao might not be able to last forever. Meng Ran's heart shook violently. Looking at Kong Jingfeng's calm face, he immediately knew that Kong Jingfeng also knew about this. Eldest martial brother, this is too risky. Meng Ran took a deep breath. His face was full of worry. Wealth comes from danger. Wu Yunliang said emotionlessly. For a sect to rise for the first time, even though it is difficult, it is not impossible. But after their glory, they declined, and when they wanted to rise again, it was even more difficult. We must be prepared for the destruction of our sect. Meng Ran sighed deeply and did not say anything else. 3 days ago, I already sent my younger martial brother to secretly take Qianqian, Shuiyi, and Mu Shang to Iron Cloud Nation. First, there was something to do there. Second, it was also the first time for Qianqian, Shuiyi, and Mu Shang to practice in Jianghu. Just think of it as probing the situation. Kong Jingfeng was shocked. Eldest martial brother, how could you let Qianqian go? I knew you would stop me if you knew. That's why I didn't tell you. Wu Yunliang said casually. 3 days have already passed. Even if you want to go back, you can't do it. Kong Jingfeng anxiously said. I have nothing to say if my younger martial brother took Shuiyi and Mu Shang. But why did you let Qianqian go? This trip is so dangerous. Plus, all the great sects are already eyeing us. What if... That is also her fate, Wu Yunliang said coldly. A few days ago, you told me about our sex-female disciples. I was thinking about this matter. Letting Qian go is also to test the horses in Jianghu. Testing the horses in Jianghu. There are so many female disciples in Beyond the Heavens sect. There are many who are not any less beautiful than Qian. But why did you have to send Qian? Kong Jingfeng said angrily. She is your biological daughter. My daughter is my own daughter. Don't tell me that the other female disciples in the sect are all bastards. Do they not have parents to raise them? Are they not the treasures of their parents? Wu Yunliang said heavily. Are my Wu Yunliang's daughters so delicate? Kong Jingfeng angrily stomped his feet. He looked at his eldest martial brother with eyes that seemed to be spitting fire. But she is not only your daughter, she is also our niece. You should not let her take this risk. Because she is my daughter, she has a responsibility to the other female disciples in the sect. Wu Yunliang said coldly. My daughter is not the emperor's princess. If I let her hide in the back and let the other female disciples use their lives to pave the way for her, then I would rather not have this daughter. Beyond the Heavens sect is bathing in fire. The fire is slowly burning. To rise again, there is no price that cannot be paid. There is no one that cannot be sacrificed. Including me, including you, and of course, including my daughter. After Wu Yunliang finished speaking, he turned around. His back was as straight as a spear. But on the side where the two could not see, the muscles in the corners of his eyes twitched. I hope Qian can return safely. As a father, sending his own daughter out on such a dangerous mission, how much pressure must his heart bear? Am I really so heartless? But I am not only the father of a daughter, I am also the sect master of 1,000 disciples of Beyond the Heavens sect. When it is time to sacrifice, even if all the disciples are sacrificed, I must do it. But if I can only sacrifice one, then I will sacrifice my daughter. Because I am the sect master of Beyond the Heavens sect. Wu Yunliang gritted his teeth. His cheeks puffed up a little, but he quickly regained his composure. He did not turn around. His voice was a little hoarse as he said, Youngest, you must teach Chuyang well. That fleeting snow cloud steps, that fleeting snow cloud steps. He paused and pondered for a while. Then he slowly said, Let him practice well. If he has any tricks, he can learn them himself. You two master and disciple can learn them together. But do not let a third party know. Chapter 27. You only see the benefits, but not the pros and cons. Before the sect is cleaned up, there will be too many spies. If this information is leaked, then it will not be a matter of cultivation. I am afraid that our ultimate skill will become a weapon for the enemy to use against us. Wu Yunliang said casually. Before the dust settles, you must not leak this information. You'd better create another set of footwork for him to confuse. Yes. Meng Chao Ran's heart shivered. For Wu Yunliang to say this, it meant that the situation at Beyond the Heavens sect was extremely serious. This was enough to prove that his previous guesses were too optimistic. Confuse? Confuse who? Right now, outsiders do not know. The only ones who know are the disciples of second martial brother. But they still need to confuse. Also, Chu Yang's 7 Shades Absolute God Palm, how did he cultivate the in extreme cold chi? This matter is really surprising. However, do not let him relax. Wu Yunliang pondered and said slowly, Wait until he reaches a certain level of cultivation. Then let him enter 7 Shades congregation grounds to increase his cultivation. Even though your little brother is a genius, his cultivation is still too low. For now, he will not be of any use. You must be aware of this. Meng Chao Ran nodded thoughtfully. Junior Martial Brother Meng, I originally had a plan. I saw that your disciple Shi Qianshan is very scheming. He is a suitable candidate. But now, it seems that Shi Qianshan is not very useful. But this Chu Yang. Wu Yunliang smiled. I have a great use for him. A great use? Meng Chao Ran raised his eyebrows. His eyes became sharp. Even in Iron Cloud, we do not have a foundation. The sect needs someone to enter Iron Cloud and act as a spy, Wu Yunliang said seriously. Chu Yang, looking at his performance today, he is without a doubt a suitable candidate. How about we use him as a spy? Meng Chao Ran was stunned. He did not speak for a long time. After a while he said, "This is without a doubt a good opportunity, but it is also very dangerous. In each of these countries, there are as many experts as there are clouds. If we are discovered, it will be a disaster. Chu Yang is still young. I hope Senior Marshal Brother will carefully consider this matter. If you don't experience wind and rain, how can you become a talent?" Wu Yunliang said. "If you always fight with your back against the river, if you don't take big risks, how can you reap the greatest rewards? Therefore, you can rest assured about one thing. The other brothers can be exposed, but Chu Yang won't." After Wu Yunliang finished speaking, he called out to Kong Jingfeng, and the two of them bid farewell to Meng Chao Ran. The long figure slowly disappeared. Meng Chao Ran stood in front of the purple bamboo garden in disappointment. The three figures looked somewhat heavy. Meng Chao Ran let out a long sigh. His eyes were filled with worry as he muttered, "Eldest Marshal Brother, there are some things that cannot be done by the strength of one sect of Beyond the Heavens sect. What could an insignificant Beyond the Heavens sect do between the two countries? Taking a risk out of desperation was an act of helplessness. Fighting with one's back to the river was a taboo. If you are not careful, you will be smashed to pieces. Don't overreach yourself. Beyond the Heavens sect can no longer withstand such a huge upheaval." Meng Chao Ran could faintly feel that in this world, there was a huge whirlpool. And Beyond the Heavens sect was at the center of this whirlpool. It could be destroyed at any time, and this whirlpool was actually being pushed forward by Beyond the Heavens sect itself. They were even sparing no effort. Within 10,000 miles of lower three heavens, there were three countries. Any further, and they would be far away from the scope of this battle. Among these three countries, the Great Shao Empire lived up to its name. Its territory was the most vast. The power of the country was enormous, and its population was also relatively rich. It was dominating one area and was gradually encroaching on the surrounding areas. There was a faint aura of wanting to unify the world. The other two countries were Iron Cloud Nation and Limitless Nation. Even though these two countries' strength could be considered strong, they were far inferior to Great Shao. The target of Great Shao's annexation was precisely these two countries. Territorial battles frequently broke out at the borders of the three countries. At this moment, in the capital of Iron Cloud Nation, there were 4 travel-worn people and 4 riders standing in front of Iron Cloud Citadel. 1 old man, 2 young men, and a young woman with a black veil covering her face. All 4 of them had bloodstains on their bodies. Looking at each other, that old man let out a long sigh and said, "Finally, we are here. Qian, how are you?" His voice revealed a sense of relief. "I am fine." Wu Qian's eyes revealed fatigue as she shook her head. "This time, there were too many interceptions along the way. Our whereabouts should be kept a secret. This should not have happened. This is somewhat abnormal." This old man was the master of Beyond the Heavens sects treading on Cloud's Peak, Bao Kuanglei. Bao, this was a relatively rare surname. Bao Kuanglei was one of Wu Yunliang's younger brothers. He was a courageous and resourceful person. His actions were steady, he dared to fight, and he handled matters flawlessly. His personality was not in line with his name. "No matter what, we are finally here." Wu Qian smiled. The 4 people looked at each other. There were some things that needed to be said. There must be a traitor in the sect. Moreover, their status was not low. "Let's enter the city." Bao Kuanglei's expression darkened. Then, he raised his spirits and waved his hand. Following the flow of people into the city, they arrived in front of a palace. On a plaque made entirely of silver, there were 3 shining golden words, Thousand Autumns Manor. Thousand Autumns Manor was the crown. Manor of Iron Cloud Nation. The Crown Prince of Iron Cloud Nation lived here. After the announcement, the four people entered Thousand Autumn's manor. Under the guidance of a servant, they arrived at the main hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a comfortable chair. A handsome young man wearing a soft yellow robe was reclining on it. He held a book in his hand and seemed to be reading hard. His long eyebrows reached his temples. His face was like a jade crown. A purple jade crown tied up his black hair. This young man was somewhat thin. He seemed to be too weak to even stand up to a gust of wind. His hand holding the book was somewhat slender and dry, but it was very stable. His face was filled with a gentle aura. He looked very quiet, very peaceful, and even very weak, making people involuntarily want to protect him. But once he got closer, he would feel that this weak and quiet youth, just sitting there, made people feel like he was the bright moon in the sky, too high to reach. It was as if the power of life and death under the heavens was in the hands of that pair of thin and dry hands. After the servant announced their arrival, the young man put down the book in his hand and slowly turned his head. Looking at the four people, his face revealed a smile as if the spring breeze had thawed. He said gently, "The four of you have come a long way. Please sit." Bao Kuan-lei cupped his fists and said, "Many thanks for the seat." He led Wu Qian and the other two to sit down. This young man was the crown prince of Iron Cloud Nation, Tai Butian. At this moment, his eyes swept over the four people. Suddenly, he smiled and raised his eyebrows. Invisibly, a murderous aura leaked out. He said lightly, "Was this journey not peaceful?" "Not bad. Along the way, every step was dangerous." Bao Kuan-lei sat calmly. They were people of sex, and did not belong to the imperial court. When they saw the crown prince, they did not need to greet him. However, Shui Yimeng and Qin Mu Shang were somewhat nervous. "Haha! It seems that someone is working in the dark." Tai Butian smiled faintly. As he laughed, his eyes slowly narrowed. He stood up with his hands behind his back and said slowly, "But the four of you can rest assured. I promise that this kind of thing will not happen in Iron Cloud Nation, not even once." Although he was thin and not very tall, with his hands behind his back and his long eyebrows raised, his eyes indifferently swept around. There was an awe-inspiring aura of a monarch. It was as if the entire heavens and earth were being trampled under his feet. Bao Kuan-lei's heart shook. He finally understood the decision of his eldest senior brother. Just by looking at the crown prince of Iron Cloud standing there, one could tell that he was definitely a hero. Chapter 28. The four of you will stay here for the time being. Tomorrow morning, I will personally report to my father. Regarding this matter, once my father has made a decision, we will immediately begin," Tai Butian said with a smile. Just a moment ago, he still had the aura of a heavenly sword, but with a smile, his entire temperament seemed to have changed. He was kind and gentle, approachable, and made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze. He did not even need to use any special methods to win people's hearts, but this kind of calmness would make people want to die for him. Yes. Bao Kuan-lei's heart trembled. He could not help but raise his evaluation of this Tai Yun Tai by another level. Although this grand elder was young, he was not simple at all. In his life, no matter if it was young or old, there was no one who could compare to this person. No wonder he was hailed as the #1 genius of the lower three heavens, the only natural-born king. Before meeting Tai Butian, Bao Kuan-lei did not think much of this saying, "In this world, what natural-born king?" It was just that he came from a good background, received better education than the average person, studied the arts of the emperor since childhood, and accumulated his aura over a long period of time. As for the #1 genius, was there a lack of geniuses in this world? But at this moment, he believed it. That kind of elegance in his bones, the majesty in his soul, and the natural demeanor of a king, made Bao Kuan-lei, a fierce person of the Jianghu, tremble in his soul. At this moment, the purple bamboo garden of Beyond the Heavens sect was in full swing. Beyond the Heavens sect, early morning. Tan Tan was lying on the ground in a tie shape, panting heavily. He rolled his eyes and said, Chu Young, I admit that you are more handsome than me, okay? You have been too ruthless these days, right? You have almost drilled me to death. These days, whenever Chu Yang got up to practice, he would drag Tan Tan along. Every time Tan Tan was half dead tired. After a few days, Tan Tan had reached the point where he would tremble in fear whenever he saw Chu Yang. Chu Yang was very precise every time. He knew exactly how long Tan Tan needed to practice to reach the limit of his body. Every time after practice, he would make sure that Tan Tan could not stand up with his own strength without harming his body. Now, every time Tan Tan saw him, it was like seeing a ghost. In the beginning, he was still bragging and narcissistic, but now he didn't even have the time to be narcissistic. Chu Yang took a deep breath, stopped practicing, and stood up. In these 20 days, he hadn't slacked off at all in his cultivation. Currently, he had already raised his cultivation level to martial disciple. He was only one step away from becoming a martial warrior. Feeling the changes in his body, Chu Yang smiled. Only by becoming a martial warrior could one truly begin to temper one's body. Before becoming a martial warrior, if one were to forcefully temper their body, regardless of whether it was their bones or internal organs, they would be severely damaged due to excessive tempering. This principle should still be a misconception in the current lower three heavens, right? Therefore, there was a saying circulating in the lower three heavens, Zhang Qianqiu's rule, martial artist Jia Xiu. He was talking about this matter. It meant that people who practice martial arts could not live past the age of 10. Although this sentence had the meaning of suppressing martial arts, and this saying was also somewhat arbitrary, every year there were many martial disciples who desperately cultivated in order to raise their cultivation level as soon as possible. However, due to excessive exhaustion, their physical strength was overdrawn, and their bodies could not bear it. Although their cultivation level had increased at that time, when they were about 50 years old, this drawback would be exposed. And once it was exposed, the body was basically destroyed, and there was no way to save it. The time when a martial artist's body suffered the greatest damage was when they were building their foundation as a martial disciple. Only one step away. And the cultivation condition of Calamity Sword's heavenly tribulation divine technique was to become a martial warrior. In fact, it wasn't just Calamity Sword. Even some of the techniques of the lower three heavens were clearly written on the title page. Those below the martial warrior level are not allowed to cultivate. With a move of his dantian, the new energy that Chu Yan had painstakingly cultivated in the afternoon was swallowed by Calamity Sword. After a while, it was spat out. Although the amount was much less, it was extremely pure. Although this kind of energy was not as pure as Xiantian energy, it was much purer and more condensed than Xiantian energy. It was a world of difference compared to ordinary acquired energy. These days, every time he took a step forward, he would feel Calamity Sword move inexplicably in his body. Over time, Chu Yan had become accustomed to it. The purple crystal jade essence hanging on his neck did not react. Regarding this purple crystal jade essence, Chu Yang was somewhat speechless. The first time he used this purple crystal jade essence to recover his physical strength, the Calamity Sword's spirit in his dantian suddenly rushed up. Before Chu Yang could enjoy it, it suddenly cut off the connection. Chu Yang tried several times, but the Calamity Sword's spirit cut him off. It clearly wanted him to rely on his own strength to cultivate, and would not let him borrow external forces. However, the Calamity Sword's spirit did not care if he used it to recover his physical strength when facing an enemy. Just like when he dealt with Chu Ping, the Calamity Sword's spirit did not react at all. But after the battle, he was not allowed to use it. In the face of such an impartial and overbearing supervisor, Chu Yang could only submit. The idea of using the purple crystal jade essence for cultivation was extinguished from his heart. Turning his head to look at Tan Tan's embarrassed appearance, Chu Yang almost laughed out loud. Helplessly, he said, "Okay, you should rest." When Tan Tan heard these words, it was as if the Emperor's grace was vast and mighty. He almost shed tears of gratitude. He got up with great difficulty, and crawled to the side on all fours. Then, he sighed comfortably. On the field, Chu Yang continued to practice his sword drawing and sheathing of the sword. It was a simple and boring movement. But Chu Yang practiced it with the greatest passion and full of concentration every time. The sun slowly rose from the east. Chu Yang's head and body were steaming hot. Beads of sweat dripped down from his head and fell to the ground. Tan Tan finally recovered. But he looked at Chu Yang's movements and slowly saw that he was in a trance. Chu Yang had been repeating the same movements. But Tan Tan found that Chu Yang was doing this movement hundreds of times. And it was different every time. It seemed as if he was adjusting it. It looked a little awkward at first. But it became smoother and smoother later on. In the end, it formed a light curtain. Drawing the sword, sheathing the sword, sheathing the sword. The cycle continued, and the voice gradually became softer. It wasn't obvious, but it did become softer little by little. Chu Yang, your arm is swollen. Tan Tan looked at Chu Yang for a long time. Suddenly, he found that Chu Yang's elbow and shoulder were abnormally thick. He couldn't help but shout. Chu Yang's face remained unchanged. He was indifferent and expressionless. He continued to practice this movement. He said indifferently, "Is it swollen? It will go away as you practice. Tan Tan, it's swollen. If you wait for it to go away, then it will be too late. But when you get used to this kind of strength, the swelling will go away. When the swelling goes away, then it will be time for you to improve." Tan Tan was stunned. He suddenly felt ashamed. He felt that he had recovered a lot of strength. He stood up and continued to practice. Meng Chao Ran stood quietly in the purple bamboo forest. Looking at the two martial brothers practicing, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of gratification. The sound of groaning came from the room. It was Shi Qianshan suffering. He had been lying on the bed for 20 days. Chu Ping and the others were ruthless. That day, they broke Shi Qianshan's ribs and thighs. For at least 3 months, Shi Qianshan could not practice martial arts. For half a year, he could not use martial arts. But half a year later, the ranking competition of Beyond the Heavens sect was almost over. This injury was tantamount to destroying Shi Qianshan's future in Beyond the Heavens sect. The torment of the physical body could never be compared to the pain of the heart. Therefore, Shi Qianshan was filled with hatred. Strangely, he did not hate the people who hurt him, but he hated Chu Yang the most. In Shi Qianshan's heart, if it was not for Chu Yang, he would definitely have a meteoric rise. Chapter 29. Shi Qianshan's intuition was very accurate. His current miserable state was entirely caused by Chu Yang. During this period of time, Chu Yang took care of Shi Qianshan in every possible way. Every day, he would come to report to Shi Qianshan. "Eldest martial brother, how are you? I have broken through to the 5th level of martial disciple today. Eldest martial brother, I broke through to the 7th level today. I am now at the 7th level." These good news made Shi Qianshan feel like he was being pierced by thousands of arrows. His mood was extremely gloomy, and the recovery of his injuries was even slower. Even when his mood was extremely bad, his injuries showed signs of worsening. However, Shi Qianshan should not have hated Chu Yang, but also Meng Chao Ran and Tan Tan. He hated them to the bone. How could Chu Yang advance so quickly? It must be because Meng Chao Ran was biased. Master must have a miraculous elixir that could quickly increase a person's cultivation. After so many years, he did not give it to me, but gave it to Chu Yang. Thinking about this, Shi Qianshan's heart was burning with jealousy. In the end, he could not live under the same sky with Meng Chao Ran. After that day, although Meng Chao Ran's attitude was somewhat cold, he still took care of Shi Qianshan. Meng Chao Ran did not hesitate to use his martial power to connect Shi Qianshan's meridians, to relieve his pain, and to find elixirs to help him recover. However, Shi Qianshan's hatred for the house extended to its crow. He even hated his master, who had treated him with great kindness. He actually hated him so much that he gnashed his teeth. Therefore, Shi Qianshan wanted revenge. Outside Shi Qianshan's room, there was a small pond. It was only half the size of a room, and about 10 feet deep. The spring water from the purple bamboo garden flowed through here, filling the pond, and then continued to flow downwards, forming a small stream. Therefore, the water in this pond was always clear, and the bottom could be seen. The water that Chu Yang and the others usually drank came from here. Now, Shi Qianshan was lying on the bed, trying his best to support his body. He quietly took out a paper bag from under the bed. Inside the bag was the soul-shattering powder. 5 kinds of strange poisons mixed together, colorless and tasteless. It was said that there was no cure. Putting it in the food, it was like a delicious condiment, stimulating people's appetite. Shi Qianshan's lips were trembling, and his fingers were also trembling. However, he still resolutely pulled over the candle at the head of the bed. His right hand slowly broke off a piece from the bottom. His face was sometimes red and sometimes pale, as if he was having an intense inner conflict. But his fingers didn't stop moving. He carefully wrapped the whole packet of soul-severing powder into a wax pill. Then, he hid the wax ball under his blanket. Since I've already been destroyed, how can I let you have it easy? In any case, I'm heavily injured. No matter what, even if everyone here dies, they won't suspect me. If I'm the only one left in Purple Bamboo Garden, the sect master will definitely give me preferential treatment out of consideration for our past relationship. That way, I still have a chance. I don't need to rely on you, Meng Chao Ran, I can still get up. Die, all of you are already dead. Right now, Shi Qianshan's heart was already on the verge of madness. The sun slowly rose and hung above their heads. Shi Qianshan tilted his head and listened. Then, he clenched his teeth and flicked his finger. The wax ball flew out of his hand. He only heard a soft thump sound from outside. The wax ball had obviously fallen into the pond. Shi Qianshan let out a long sigh and slumped back onto the bed. His eyes flashed with guilt and shame. But what followed was an indescribable viciousness and madness. He clenched his teeth and tightly grasped the thin blanket on his body with his right hand. He used so much strength that he almost scratched a hole in the thin blanket. But he finally relaxed his body. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Water is running water. If the poison is put in it, it will be washed away early. If it's too late, the poison won't have enough time to disperse. According to the usual lunch time, this time was just right. He calculated the time. After another quarter of an hour, he heard the sound of Tan Tan carrying a wooden bucket to fetch water. He hurriedly crawled back into the blanket, closed his eyes, and loudly groaned twice. After a long while, the sound of ding ding dang 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 could be heard. Tan Tan's strange humming sound could be heard. Then, a strong fragrance of food wafted out. Shi Qianshan silently and viciously laughed. Meng Chao Ran, Tan Tan, and Chu Yang sat around the table. Looking at the tempting fragrance of the food on the table, Tan Tan's pair of eyes looked at his master. He felt even more hungry. As soon as Meng Chao Ran opened his mouth, he would immediately start wolfing down the food. But Meng Chao Ran looked at the food and frowned. The color of the food was the same as usual. The fragrance was also very strong. But it seemed a little too fragrant. It was a little strange. He immediately felt that something was wrong. Meng Chao Ran pondered for a while. He just picked up the chopsticks, but then slowly put them down. He turned his head to look at Chu Yang. He couldn't help but feel moved. Chu Yang also turned his head to look at the food. He had a thoughtful look. Meng Chao Ran couldn't help but feel a little surprised. He could feel it. This was the result of decades of Jianghu experience. Moreover, he had always been cautious. In addition, he had trained himself in countless life and death situations. Only then did he develop such a keen sense. If it was an ordinary person, how could they notice the unusual fragrance of the food? The more fragrant it was, the more they wanted to eat it. But how did Chu Yang notice it? He was only 10 years old. Moreover, He had never gone out before. How could he have such observation skills? Tan Tan, you cooked the food, right? Chu Yang calmly smiled and asked. Yes, you guys quickly eat. It's so fragrant. I can't help it. Tan Tan pitifully begged. Chu Yang thoughtfully looked at the rippling water outside. He turned his wrist and a mysterious crystal jade needle appeared in his hand. He poked it in the vegetable soup. The jade needle's tip suddenly changed color. It was a frightening blue. Tan Tan's face changed. He was about to cry out in alarm. Chu Yang didn't turn his head. It seemed that he had already expected his reaction. He reached out his hand and covered his mouth. His gaze was still fixed on the food. He said heavily, Tan Tan couldn't have poisoned it. Then it's the water! Meng Chao Ran's heart shook again. He had just thought of this. It was impossible for him to poison Tan Tan's food. Moreover, he had watched Tan Tan grow up. He had never even touched poison. So how could he have poisoned it? Meng Chao Ran took a deep breath. His chest heaved up and down. Suddenly, his face was filled with anger. He suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction of Shi Qianshan's room. I'll go, Chu Yang calmly said. You? What are you going to do? Meng Chao Ran's face was ugly. I'll make him satisfied, Chu Yang lightly said. Meng Chao Ran quietly lowered his eyes. He gently smiled and said, Then you go. He paused and said, Don't go too far. Give him a chance to explain. Maybe not. Although his voice was soft, it was full of bitterness and exhaustion. No matter how unfilial Shi Qianshan was, he was still a disciple that he had taught for 7 or 8 years. Chu Yang suggested that he would handle it. He fully understood Meng Chao Ran's feelings. Although Meng Chao Ran was angry for Shi Qianshan, he also felt gratified for Chu Yang's understanding. Chu Yang nodded. He took the food that he had prepared for Shi Qianshan and walked out. He walked into Shi Qianshan's room and said with a smile, Eldest martial brother, it's time to eat. Isn't it always Tan Tan who brings food? Why is it you today? Shi Qianshan looked at him with surprise. Tan Tan is so tired today that he can't get up. Chu Yang kindly smiled and said, We are martial brothers. Isn't it the same if Tan Tan and I come? Eldest senior brother has racked his brains to take care of us for so long. His feelings are deep. It's time for me to repay him. Shi Qianshan snorted and said, My appetite is not good today. I don't want to eat. Put it aside first. What a joke. He clearly knew that there was poison in the food. Moreover, he had personally poisoned it. How could he eat it? On the other side, Meng Chao Ran, who had been concentrating his martial power to listen, could not help but snort. He still felt that it was inconceivable. The disciple that he had taught for 7 or 8 years wanted to poison him? Therefore, although he knew that it was impossible, he still wanted Chu Yang to give Shi Qianshan a chance to explain. He still had hope. Now that he heard Shi Qianshan's words, he immediately gave up. Chu Yang smiled and said, How can you not eat? Humans are made of iron and rice is made of steel. Moreover, you are injured and need nourishment. Come, quickly eat. Once you eat, everything will be fine. Shi Qianshan frowned and said with disgust, I said that I won't eat. Quickly get out. Why won't you eat? Could it be that there is poison inside? Chu Yang said sincerely, Eldest martial brother, you and I have been martial brothers for so many years. Could it be that I would poison you? Quickly eat. Chapter 30. Shi Qianshan's face changed. Chu Yang's words had poked at his sore spot. He could not help but raise his head and look at Chu Yang. He asked, What do you mean? You'll understand what I mean after you eat. Chu Yang looked at him. His eyes gradually became cold. He said slowly, I want to see if the poison in this bowl of rice can kill people. To tell you the truth, I have always been curious about this. Shi Qianshan's heart sank. He forced a smile and said, What kind of joke is this? Chu Yang smiled mischievously and said, Isn't this joke fun? Then let's do something fun. Suddenly, he carried the bowl to the bed and sat on it. He sat on Shi Qianshan's broken thigh. Crack! The bone that was just about to heal was broken again. Shi Qianshan screamed in pain. His whole body convulsed and trembled. Sweat as big as soybeans appeared on his face. His body was curled up like a shrimp. Just as he was about to scream, a piece of cotton was stuffed into his mouth. It was unknown when Chu Yang had pulled it out of the quilt. Chu Yang's movements were swift and agile, without the slightest hesitation. He completed the task in an instant. Perhaps even an old convict who had been working in the government for decades would not be able to match his fluidity at this moment. Shi Qianshan's screams were forcibly blocked and turned into a whimper. He could not make a sound. He could only stare at Chu Yang with a pair of frightened eyes. He shook his head repeatedly and sweat fell like rain. Chu Yang held the bowl in one hand and did not move an inch. However, his other hand gripped Shi Qianshan's neck. He leaned over and looked at him coldly. He said in a deep voice, Shi Qianshan, I did not want to kill you so early. I have not vented enough. Unfortunately, what you have done today has crossed my bottom line. Shi Qianshan whimpered. His eyes were full of hatred and fear. He struggled with all his might, but it affected his wound. It was so painful that sweat poured out. Shi Qianshan, let's not talk about how you have treated me in Tan for the past few years. 8 years ago, your entire family was robbed at the foot of Broken Cloud Mountain. Your entire family's lives were at the hands of the bandits, and it looked like they were about to lose their lives. Your own sister was also about to be raped by the bandits. It was Master who passed by there and saved your family's lives, as well as your sister's reputation. After that, your whole family knelt on the ground and begged. Master saw that your talent was not bad, so he took you in as a younger brother, taught you martial arts, and taught you knowledge. It's fine if you don't know how to repay kindness, but today, you actually poisoned Master and wanted to kill him? Are you still human? Chu Yang growled in a low voice. You are simply heartless and unscrupulous. Shi Qianshan's eyes revealed a look of shame, but he quickly hid it. He glared at Chu Yang fiercely, as if he wanted to eat him alive. He actually didn't repent at all. Suddenly, he coughed violently, and a stream of blood gushed up from his throat. The force of the coughing was so strong that the cotton ball in his mouth was flushed out. Fresh blood splattered onto the blanket in front of his chest. He stared at Chu Yang, but didn't cry out in pain. Chu Yang, don't pretend to be a hypocrite here. In front of me, it's useless. Your tricks, I have long since disdained to use them. Shi Qianshan's voice was low, and he coughed. Blood continued to flow from his mouth. He said hatefully, I am ungrateful, so what? I wanted to kill you all with poison, so what? I am ambitious, heartless, and unscrupulous, so what? Shi Qianshan gasped for breath, and his chest heaved up and down. If it weren't for you, Chu Yang, this time, how could I have broken my leg and be seriously injured? If it weren't for my broken leg, how could I have lost the opportunity to participate in the great competition of the peaks? If it weren't for losing this opportunity, how could my life be so gloomy? Everything is because of you, Chu Yang. You and I cannot live under the same sky. As for Master... Ha! Shi Qianshan sneered, and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. You think Meng Chao Ran has a good heart? Why did he save my family that year? Wasn't it because he liked my sister's beauty? If it weren't for my father's timely detection, and immediately married my sister after returning home, I'm afraid she would have fallen into his hands. Don't look at his usual righteous appearance, he is actually a perverted scoundrel. Sometimes at night, he even calls Choo-Choo, Choo-Choo. Do you think I didn't hear it? Choo-Choo is my sister's nickname. That perverted scoundrel. He knew that he would not be spared today, and he actually spilled out all the viciousness in his heart to his heart's content. In the dining hall, Meng Chao Ran, who was listening to the commotion, suddenly trembled. His face turned purple, and with a paw sound, the teacup in his hand was crushed. The broken pieces fell from his hand. Meng Chao Ran's beard suddenly stood up, and he fiercely exhaled. This breath shot out, and with a pew sound, it actually pierced a big hole in the thick wooden door. Ha! I said it, I said it! This old man, what great kindness! Ha! Shi Qianshan laughed crazily. Chu Yang roared, and his palm struck down. Suddenly, with a pu sound, a big hole appeared in the wall. Dust flew everywhere, and Meng Chao Ran entered through the hole, and grabbed Chu Yang's wrist. He knew that Chu Yang would not be able to endure these words, and would definitely immediately attack, so he did not have time to enter through the door. You! Old man, what else do you have to say? When Shi Qianshan saw him enter, he instinctively shrank back, and then he actually fiercely shouted. Shi Qianshan's hand that was holding Chu Yang's wrist slowly lowered. He quickly took 2 deep breaths, and miraculously recovered his calmness. He looked at Shi Qianshan's eyes without any emotion, and slowly said, Shi Qianshan, today, I will expel you from the sect. Shi Qianshan laughed, and then coughed and said, Meng Chao Ran, do you think that at this time, Master Shi still cares about the identity of your little brother? Pay! Meng Chao Ran's eyes became cold, but his voice was still calm. He said in a deep voice, Shi Qianshan, your sister Shi Chu is indeed beautiful, but not to the extent that I, Meng Chao Ran, can't forget her. Shi Qianshan snorted, and said mockingly, Then why did you call my sister's name in your sleep? Are you crazy? Meng Chao Ran's eyes flashed with anger, but it was immediately replaced by sadness. I did not call your sister. I am 48 years old this year. 8 years ago, I was 40 years old. Your sister was only 15. Ha ha, although she is beautiful, I, Meng Chao Ran, am not that despicable. He smiled bitterly and said, I called Chu Chu, not Chu Chu. Chu Chu. Yi Chu Chen is my lover, my wife. We have been separated, for 20 years already. I miss her all the time. Meng Chao Ran coldly said. That year, I saved your whole family. One of the reasons was that your sister's name and there was a word in her name that had the same pronunciation. Otherwise, in Jianghu, where the weak are prey to the strong, I, Meng Chao Ran, would not meddle in other people's business. Shi Qianshan made a sound in his throat, and was unable to say anything. He finally understood. No wonder sometimes when Master called my sister's name, his accent was so strange. So he was not calling her. Suddenly it was too late for regrets. For a moment, his intestines turned green. He had suspected for so many years. He had hated for so long. It turned out that it was his own wishful thinking. Meng Chao Ran took a deep breath and said indifferently, The reason why I had to make it clear was not for you. It was also to send you on your way. There seemed to be some contradiction in these words, but Chu Yang knew that Meng Chao Ran's explanation was meant for him. He did not want his own brother to misunderstand him. He did not want his own sacred feelings to be misunderstood. He needed someone to be a witness. Even though it had been so many years, Meng Chao Ran's heart still did not allow any blasphemy. This time, Shi Qianshan had touched Meng Chao Ran's absolute bottom line. Shi Qianshan's face changed. He struggled and shouted, Master, I was wrong, I was wrong. I was confused. I deserve to die. Please forgive me this time. As he shouted, tears flowed down his face. It's too late. You must know that in life, some things can be wrong, but some things cannot be wrong. Once you make a mistake, you will pay with your life. Meng Chao Ran coldly shook his head. He slowly stretched out his hand. His eyes flashed with a trace of sadness, but he did not care about Shi Qianshan's begging. Chapter 31. Chu Yang's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He rushed forward and slapped his palm on Shi Qianshan's chest. Pa! Shi Qianshan's chest bones were shattered. His body jerked and his eyes bulged out. Blood started to flow out of his mouth and nose. He fell backward and stopped breathing. Asterisk, 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 dead? Eh? Meng Ran looked at him and understood what he meant. He could not help but sigh. Master, it's better for younger brother to do it. He has bullied us for a long time. Today is a good time to vent, Chu Yang said calmly. Meng Ran looked at Dong Xuebing and patted his shoulder. But in the end, she did not say anything and walked out. Personally killing the younger brother that he had raised for 8 years, with Meng Ran's character, after killing him, he would probably hold a grudge. But it was different when Chu Yang did it. Although he died in front of him, he was not the one who killed him. That kind of feeling would be much lighter. How could Meng Ran not understand Chu Yang's intention? Chu Yang also sighed. Looking at Shi Qianshan's corpse, he could not help but hatefully say, "Dying so quickly is really too easy for you." These words were not wrong. If Meng Ran did not suddenly come, with Chu Yang's methods and the accumulated hatred of 2 lives, he would definitely make Shi Qianshan beg for death. Chu Yang also finally understood why Meng Ran named himself Chu Yang. First, it was because of the Chu character on the jade pendant. Second, it was because of the Chu character in Yi Chu Chen's name. Chu Yang, does it not mean the morning sun? And Chu Chen, does it not have the same meaning as my name? And Tan Tan's Tan character, does it not mean the appearance of the tan flower? Was that Meng Ran lamenting the shortness of his love? Chu Yang suddenly understood how bitter his master's heart was. The most painful thing in life is separation in life and death. And in these 4 words, separation in life is in front. This means that separation in life is much more painful than separation in death. Separation in death is painful for a while. But separation in life is painful for a lifetime. As long as one is alive, this pain and torment will never end. Yi Chu Chen. Chu Yang silently muttered. Then, he calmly looked in the direction that Meng Ran had gone. He then said in his heart, "Master, I will remember this name." Chu Yang turned his head and looked at Shi Qianshan's corpse. His eyes were wide open. Chu Yang was silent for a long time. His heart was filled with complicated emotions. He finally realized that he had truly changed the course of his life. In his previous life, Shi Qianshan should have lived for 4 years. However, in less than a month after his rebirth, Shi Qianshan died in his own hands. Chu Yang was silent for a while. Then, he wrapped the corpse in a quilt and slowly walked out. However, she was surprised to find that Tan Tan had prepared a table of dishes during this period of time. And the dishes were placed on the table. They were steaming hot. What was even more surprising was that Meng Ran didn't disappear either. He just sat there quietly, as if waiting for him. Everything was as it had always been. When Tan Tan saw Chu Yang come in, his eyebrows twitched. He rubbed his hands and asked with some apprehension, "That eldest martial brother, Shi Qianshan? Dead? I killed him," Chu Yang said casually and then sat down. Tan Tan nodded and lowered his head. He suddenly felt that he didn't have anything to eat. Just now, he also heard Shi Qianshan's words. In his heart, he also felt that Shi Qianshan deserved to die. However, he didn't know why, but there was still a faint sadness in his heart. After all, they had been together for so many years. And before this, Tan Tan had never seen Shi Qianshan's true colors. Meng Ran was silent for a while. He picked up his chopsticks and said, "Let's eat." His expression was calm as if this matter had never happened. This purple bamboo garden had never had a person named Shi Qianshan. The 3 of them were silent. The atmosphere at the banquet was heavy to the extreme. Chu Yang also didn't say anything. Master Meng Ran didn't need any consolation at this time. Even if he felt that it wasn't worth it, he would be able to adjust himself in a few days. However, it was Shi Qianshan's last words that evoked Meng Ran's emotional pain. This emotional turmoil in his heart would probably last for a long time. After Meng Ran finished eating, he saw that Chu Yang was also wolfing down his food. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, "Chu Yang, this is your first time killing someone, right? If I remember correctly, you haven't even killed a single animal before." Chu Yang was startled and said, "Yes." Only then did he remember that he was too calm after killing someone. In the eyes of Meng Ran, who was experienced in Jianghu, this was undoubtedly a very surprising matter. Even though he was a martial artist, no matter how evil he was, when he killed someone for the first time, there would always be some abnormality. But now, Chu Yang's first time killing someone was his eldest martial brother whom he had lived with for 8 years. Unexpectedly, he didn't even have any effect on his food. How could this not be strange? "Your mentality is like that of a natural killer." Meng Ran smiled faintly and said. After saying this, he suddenly remembered Wu Yunliang's suggestion. In his heart, he approved of the possibility of Chu Yang doing that dangerous mission. With this kind of calmness, even to the point of being callous, to do that mission, there was absolutely no need to worry about being exposed. However, Meng Ran was still somewhat uneasy. His mood was very conflicted. That was an opportunity, but at the same time, it was also a path of death. A natural killer! Chu Yang smiled bitterly. In his heart, he thought, even though this is the first time I killed someone in this life, in my previous life, I had already killed tens of thousands of people. How could I not be calm? I was already numb. Killing a person was not as effective as killing a dog. Shi Qianshan deserved to die. Little brother killing him was a matter of course. There was no pressure, and it was very satisfying. Chu Yang said seriously. Meng Ran looked at him and suddenly smiled faintly. He said, "Very good," and no longer spoke. 3 days quickly passed. On this night, Chu Yang sat alone in the depths of the purple bamboo forest, feeling the energy of heaven and earth. He had a premonition that today, he should be able to break through to martial warrior. Since the day he killed Shi Qianshan, the ruthlessness in his heart had been aroused. Chu Yang had always felt his Dantian's qi fluctuating violently. It was as if a bloodthirsty emotion was awakening, struggling and roaring. This was the ruthlessness that was left in his soul when he practiced the emotionless sword path in his previous life. Chu Yang spent a lot of effort to suppress this emotion and continued to cultivate calmly. However, from that moment on, the true energy in his body suddenly surged. It was as if he was about to break through some shackles. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and controlled the energy whirlpool in his dantian. The Calamity Sword seemed to have become the core. The energy whirlpool circled around the Calamity Sword in his dantian. Like lightning, it rushed out of his dantian and rushed into his meridians. With a sharp energy, it passed through his meridians. It gradually went up. After it passed through his meridians, it had already formed a vast energy flow. Chu Yang's mind moved, and the energy flow broke away from the circulation channel of a martial disciple. It brazenly continued to rush up to the bottleneck of a martial warrior. Boom! Chu Yang only felt a sudden thunderous sound in his body. His body shook violently, and with a puff, he spat out a mouthful of blood. 2 streaks of blood came out of his nostrils. His face was flushed red. However, the vast energy flow had already broken through the bottleneck. It charged forward little by little in the newly opened meridians. Chu Yang controlled it with his mind. After breaking through, it was the first time he circulated his martial power through the new meridians. He must be careful. Otherwise, there would be damage. This damage was invisible, but it could restrict a person's future achievements. It was as if he was crossing a wooden bridge. After guiding the energy flow through one cycle, Chu Yang was already sweating profusely. However, he did not relax and continued to circulate. 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 1 cycle. After the cycle was completed, Chu Yang suddenly exhaled. He felt that there was no strength in his body, but his whole body felt as comfortable as if he was immersed in warm water. The breath he exhaled, even in the pitch-black darkness of the night, flashed in front of him, and then dissipated into the air. In a hidden corner of the purple bamboo forest, Meng Ran stood motionless. His body was already covered with frost marks, and he was concentrating on protecting his younger brother. The moment Chu Yang broke through, Meng Ran also let out a long sigh of relief. He finally succeeded. Chu Yang's path of cultivation had taken another step forward. Chapter 32. Chu Yang only broke through to martial warrior. How could he force out the impurities in his meridians? What kind of monstrous disciple did I get? Meng Chao Ran was completely stunned. To be able to shock the usually carefree Meng Chao Ran to such an extent, this was definitely the first time in Beyond the Heavens sect. If Wu Yunliang and the others knew about this, their eyeballs would probably fall to the ground. Normally, when a martial warrior breaks through, they force out the impurities in their body. These impurities are acquired and are called body transformation. Martial warriors, from level 1 to peak martial warrior, basically remove the impurities on the surface of the body. After that is martial masters. Martial masters also force out the impurities in their body step by step, making their body more suitable for cultivation. Martial masters force out the impurities in their body, including the 5 viscera. These are also acquired impurities. This step is called body transformation. After that, when a martial great master breaks through, the impurities in their meridians are also acquired. It was only at this stage that he could be considered to have reached the stage of cultivation. This step is called meridian cleansing. Above martial great master, when a revered martial artist cultivates, it is time to force out the impurities in the deepest part of the body. This step is called meridian cleansing. Meridian cleansing is also the last step of refining the body. Now, Chu Yang had only broken through to martial warrior, but he had already reached the meridian cleansing stage. How could Meng Chao Ran not be shocked? It must be known that the current Meng Chao Ran was only at the late stage of meridian cleansing. Chu Yang often let out a sigh of relief. He had finally broken through to martial warrior. In other words, as long as he obtained the first fragment of Tribulation Sword, he could immediately cultivate Tribulation Divine Technique. Meng Chao Ran was surprised, but Chu Yang was not surprised at all. Every morning he persisted in doing the same set of movements, constantly removing the impurities in his body. The impurities on the surface of his body, muscles, and bones had already been removed. These were the marvelous movements of Tribulation Sword. They were the secrets of the human body. Although it was only one movement, it allowed the entire body to move from inside to outside at the same time. At the same time, it created a pressure several times stronger, removing the impurities. It was just this set of seemingly ordinary movements, but it was hard to find even with tens of thousands of gold. It was a martial artist's treasure. Chu Yang stood up. His feet were nailed to the ground as if they were nailed to the ground. His upper body slowly leaned back. His waist seemed to have been broken. His head was bent all the way between his legs. Then, his hands reached under his crotch and grabbed his chin. Then, he exerted his strength, and his body suddenly bounced up from the ground in the shape of a round ball. It was spinning in the air. Meng Chaoran noticed that while he was spinning in the air, every part of his body was still moving in this position. From his neck to his toes, the sound of joints cracking could be heard, one after another. Meng Chaoran was shocked. Although he didn't know the effect of this action, he knew that it was extremely difficult. If it were him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it the first time. Chu Yang spun 7 or 8 times in the air before landing on the ground. He rolled back and forth on the ground in a circle. Then, his body suddenly stretched out like a chick breaking out of an eggshell. The sound of the joints in his body became even more intense. Then, he slowly stood up. His body was in a posture that was almost like a toddler learning to walk. When he stood up, his legs trembled no less than 1,000 times. Every tremble was accompanied by a crisp sound from the depths of his bones. In the end, he steadied his body. The sound of the joints in his body weakened, but his 2 arms slowly stretched out in a strange position. Another burst of cracking sounds came from his arms. Pa pa pa, Meng Chaoran was almost stunned. He finally understood the meaning of this set of movements. But when he thought about it, he was horrified. This set of movements was clearly the trajectory of life. Every movement seemed strange and incomprehensible, but they were all full of traces of the great Tao. From nothing to something, becoming an egg, gestating, breaking out of the shell, standing up, this was the trajectory of life belonging to the birds. Chu Yang made 4 movements, and then stopped. This was also a set of movements contained in the Calamity Sword. Only after entering the martial warrior realm could he practice this set of movements. If he practiced this set of movements as a martial disciple, he was afraid that he would break all the bones in his body. The pain he had to endure to practice this set of movements was not much lighter than breaking bones. Moreover, it was a continuous pain that penetrated into the bone marrow. But from beginning to end, Chu Yang did not even make a sound. If he made a sound, he would lose his vitality, and the effect would be greatly reduced. After his rebirth, Chu Yang had already made up his mind. Either he did not do it, or he did it to the best of his ability. He took a deep breath. At this time, the sweat on his body surged out violently. On the ground, it was quickly soaking through at a speed visible to the naked eye. Master, these 4 movements are called the limitless Tao of heaven and earth. There are too many mysteries in it, and I don't understand them fully. Master, please correct me. Chu Yang did not turn his head and said lightly. He knew that his master must be protecting him. Although he did not notice, Meng Chaoran was definitely there. Because it was only 4 years later in his previous life that he found out that every time the 3 of them broke through, although Meng Chaoran seemed indifferent on the surface, he was even more nervous than them. Every time, he had to be fully alert to secretly protect them. When they broke through, they only needed to work hard, but their master had to suffer in secret for several days. But Meng Chaoran never said anything. He was a person who only did and did not say anything. By the time Chu Yang understood his master's good intentions, it was already too late. In this life, how could he miss it? Meng Chaoran chuckled and walked out of the purple bamboo forest. He asked, "How did you know I was here?" Chu Yang smiled. His eyes shone with deep emotion. He said, "When we broke through, Master was not here. When we were cultivating, we were never disturbed. When we were breaking through, there wasn't even a mosquito by our side. It was absolutely quiet, not to mention other snakes, insects, and rats. In this purple bamboo forest that is filled with these things, isn't it strange?" Meng Chaoran smiled with gratification. He said, "You worked hard. Breaking through is your own ability. I was just secretly watching." Meng Chaoran did not say anything, but his heart was moved. He knew that Chu Yang's set of movements were deliberately done for him to see. It was so that he could also practice and improve his ability to protect himself. This set of movements was full of traces of the great Tao. It was absolutely beneficial for him to comprehend martial arts. He did not say anything, but his heart secretly remembered it. This set of movements was absolutely precious. He really did not know where Chu Yang learned it. But Meng Chaoran did not ask. Everyone had their own secrets. If Chu Yang did not want to take the initiative to say it, he would not ask. He respected his disciple's privacy. Chu Yang is my disciple. Knowing this is enough. Meng Chaoran stood for a while and went back. How could he not know that Chu Yang was on the verge of breaking through? He had been observing Chu Yang's movements every day for several days. He was mentally exhausted. But Chu Yang had just broken through, so he did not feel sleepy. It was late at night. Chu Yang hugged his knees and sat alone on the peak of the mountain. He looked at the dark night, and his heart was in turmoil. "Qing Wu, I am already a martial warrior. Soon, I will be able to cultivate to the tribulation level and have the power to protect you. I will not let you suffer any harm. Where are you now? The Qing Wu now is only 10 years old, right?" As Chu Yang thought, he could not help but smile gently. I wonder how Qing Wu looks like now. Is she still a little girl? With a ponytail? In his previous life, he met Mo Qing Wu after the New Year. At that time, Mo Qingwu was 10 years old. He was 25 years old. Thinking of Mo Qingwu at that time, Chu Yang's mind wandered. He still remembered that Mo Qingwu also liked purple bamboo. And because of the warmth of his childhood, he always chose a place to cultivate in seclusion. He would always find a patch of purple bamboo. So, it was at Nirvana? In the purple bamboo forest on the heavenly mist peak, he met Mo Qingwu for the first time. And finally, Mo Qingwu was attacked near the purple bamboo forest on the heavenly mist peak. Inside there were a few bamboo houses that Mo Qingwu built herself. There were a few young bamboos. Mo Qingwu carefully planted them on the path to welcome him. He remembered that Mo Qingwu had said at that time, "Chu Yang, if I die one day, please burn my body into ashes and scatter them on this path. Plant my heart and soul on this path, just so that when you walk from here, you can step on me. I would rather let you step on everything I have, even if you are not here to see me, but just to see these purple bamboos. But please let me feel that you are here, that will be enough." Qingwu, Qingwu, Chu Yang's heart ached as he called out to her. He smiled gently, his eyes full of anticipation. The first one has been sent to sleep. Brothers and sisters who have tickets, throw a few tickets. *G. Chapter 33. As the night deepened, it was nearing the third night watch period. Chu Yang sat like a rock, deep in thought. His sleeves gently fluttered in the night wind, but he did not move an inch. The fourth night watch period arrived. Heaven and earth suddenly fell into the deepest darkness. Chu Yang was about to get up and return to his room when he suddenly felt something strange. His eyes suddenly became sharp as he looked towards the left side of the mountain road. On the left side was a road that led to beyond the heaven sect. It diverged from another mountain range and was very hidden. Under Chu Yang's gaze, a few shadows suddenly appeared at the bottom of the cliff. They were as fast as the wind and disappeared like ghosts in the dark night. The direction they disappeared in was actually the direction of beyond the heaven sect. Chu Yang's eyes narrowed. The fourth night watch period was the best time for night walkers to move. Moreover, the darkest time was less than half an hour. These people had clearly been hiding here for a long time, but they had to wait until now to act. They definitely did not have good intentions. Thinking of Meng Rant's words about protecting beyond the heaven sect, Chu Yang's eyes became serious. He suddenly got up and rushed down the cliff like a meteor. Using the cliff wall as support, he reached the bottom. Then, using the mountain rocks and trees as cover, he quickly chased after the three people. Although he was only a first-grade martial warrior, he was not the least bit afraid. Even if he was no match for them, he was still confident that he could escape. If these people really had bad intentions, Chu Yang felt that he was quite competent in causing trouble. He chased after them for a few miles. Chu Yang's movements were light and graceful, seemingly slow but actually fast. If there was an expert watching from the side, he would definitely be shocked. Every place he landed was an absolute blind spot. As he flew, he constantly used objects to cover his body. He seemed to be looking for temporary cover, but every time, it was absolutely flawless. His body was floating a few feet away, but his eyes were always looking for cover within a few feet of him. He had already made a perfect plan. Chu Yang continued to move forward. After chasing for 5 miles, he could already see the mountain gate of beyond the heaven sect in the distance. Chu Yang suddenly felt something and immediately stopped. His body flashed, and he was already in the shadows. Then, he laid his body flat on the mountain rock and moved forward. Although it was a little slow, there was absolutely no sound coming from him. The 3 shadows were waiting quietly in a valley at the corner of the mountain. Not far in front of them was the mountain gate of beyond the heaven sect. Over there were younger brothers who were on duty day and night. Moreover, there were quite a few of them. Each mountain peak sent out one person to supervise and restrict each other, as well as to keep each other company. Other than the purple bamboo garden, the other peaks of beyond the heaven sect were all within this mountain gate. These people obviously didn't dare to force their way in. Although they were not afraid of these gatekeepers with their strength, they would still alert the enemy. It seemed like they were waiting, or were they going to meet here? Chu Yang thought to himself. Then, he slowly moved forward another 30 feet. He was now less than 100 feet away from those three people. The three of them were all black turbaned sexy faces. They were carefully hiding behind a large rock. Chu Yang looked at the place where they were hiding, and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. These three people seemed to be Jianghu veterans. The place they chose to hide in was a blind spot on three sides. Moreover, this was the only side where there were two exits. One of the exits was relatively hidden. In other words, even if there was an accident, they could escape quickly and not be caught by the enemy. Chu Yang held his breath. His body was like a rock as he quietly waited. His patience and confidence could be compared to anyone in the world. Time slowly slipped away. Among the three people, a slightly thin figure seemed to be somewhat impatient. He slightly adjusted his posture and whispered, "What's going on? Didn't we agree on this time? Why hasn't that damned guy come yet? Don't be impatient." Another black-clothed man cautiously looked around and whispered a warning. Then, he raised his head and looked around. He suspiciously said, "Why do I feel like there's movement?" Hearing this, the other two also became alert. They pricked up their ears and looked around. Chu Yang's breathing rate remained the same. He treated their words as farts. Motionless. This was a kind of reaction. It was like a person walking alone at night. If someone was following behind him, he would have this kind of reaction even if he didn't turn his head. Not to mention martial artists, even ordinary people had this kind of reaction ability. But if he turned his head and didn't find anything, he would just treat it as an illusion. Sure enough, after the three people looked around, they all relaxed. The black-clothed man who said there was movement laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "I was being paranoid. It's always right to be cautious." The other two whispered. At this moment, there was a movement from the mountain gate. A voice shouted, "Who is it?" A steady and low voice said, "It's me. Oh, it's Second Martial Uncle. I've been disrespectful. Is Second Martial Uncle going to practice martial arts?" "Yes, this is the best time to practice martial arts. You people must also remember that hard work can make up for your lack of talent. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth is the thickest in the morning. It's the best time to practice martial arts. Yes, we will follow Second Martial Uncle's teachings." A black shadow slowly walked over. Behind him, the disciple who was guarding the gate was still praising. "Second Martial Uncle is worthy of being a big figure in our sect. His martial arts are high, but he's easy to approach. He's also very diligent. Every day at this time, he comes out to practice. This perseverance is really amazing. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to do it." Another voice said, "That's right. What kind of person is Second Martial Uncle? How can you compare to him?" Chu Yang's heart shook. This person was Second Martial Uncle Li Jinsong, Li Jian's father. The master of Locking Cloud's Peak of Beyond the Heaven sect, the second most important person. Li Jinsong was dressed in martial arts clothes, carrying a long sword on his back. He looked like he was out to practice swordsmanship. He leisurely went out of the mountain gate. With a long body, he drew a beautiful arc. Behind him, there was another sound. Li Jinsong flew a few times and came to the corner. He turned a few more times and walked to the back of the huge rock. It seemed that they had contacted each other more than once or twice. Chu Yang thought to himself. In addition, the disciple who was guarding the gate said, "Every day at this time, he comes out to practice martial arts." It was enough to show that Li Jinsong had done a lot of things in secret. "Why did you come so late? Is there any news?" The skinny man asked impatiently in a low voice. "Am I late?" Li Jinsong snorted. It was obvious that he was dissatisfied with this question. He said, "Did you bring the things?" "The things are not urgent." The other person quickly tried to smooth things over. He said, "Brother Li, quickly tell us about the recent changes in the situation." Li Jinsong snorted and lowered his voice. The situation is a bit strange. I want to ask, besides you, is there anyone else who has designs on Beyond the Heavens sect? The three men in black were also startled. They looked at each other and said, "This is not clear." However, Beyond the Heavens sect is in a precarious situation right now. There are many people who have designs on it. Li Jinsong made an "oh" sound and said, "Just a while ago, Wu Yunliang sent old Violet Lei to take two of his sect's most outstanding disciples and his daughter to Iron Cloud Nation." Iron Cloud Nation? The three asked at the same time. Yes, and this trip was very secretive. But as far as I know, the four of them were intercepted more than once on the way. Obviously, someone did not want them to go. Moreover, these people are very well informed. Li Jinsong said calmly. Behind the rock, Chu Yang's heart shook. It seems that Li Jinsong was not the only spy. What is the purpose of going to Iron Cloud Nation? The three men obviously did not care about the safety of Bao Kuang Lei and the others. They only wanted to know the reason. I don't know. Li Jinsong frowned and said. But no matter what, they went to Iron Cloud. For us, half of our goal has been achieved. Yes, Beyond the Heavens sect is within Great Zhao's borders. Wu Yunliang actually dared to send people to collude with Iron Cloud. He really has guts. One of the men in black said gloomily. Is this the only news? Is it worth it for us to come all the way here? Brotherly, this is a bit too much. The other man in black had a mask on his face, but from his voice, one could hear that he was smiling insincerely. Of course not. It's just that you promised something. It's time to fulfill it. Li Jinsong suppressed his anger and said, You are from the imperial court and the military. You will not go back on your promises. Moreover, we have secretly pressured Wu Yunliang to side with Iron Cloud. Even though the final decision has not been made, it is the same as saying that my mission has been accomplished. Secretly, Chu Yang was startled. The imperial court and the military? Beyond the Heavens sect is only a sect. What does it have to do with the imperial court and the military? And this imperial court is obviously the imperial court of Great Zhao. Chu Yang faintly felt that a great conspiracy was in progress. Perhaps the destruction of Beyond the Heavens sect in his previous life had a lot to do with this. Chapter 34. Brotherly, this is not what Prime Minister Diwu told you. The man in black, who was obviously the leader, laughed and said, We support you in defeating Wu Yunliang and eliminating all dissidents. You are in sole control of Beyond the Heavens sect. You will be listed as a sect of the Imperial Court. Brother Li's disciples can enter the Imperial Court as officials and bring honor to their ancestors. He laughed in a low voice. With such great benefits, I am afraid that even the Heavenly Dao Union's Master Xian Yuan would be tempted. And you think that by providing one or two pieces of information, you can exchange it for a lifetime of glory and wealth? Li Jinsong was furious. He shouted in a low voice. Even the lives of my family are in your hands. How can you talk about glory and wealth? The man in black said. But brotherly, the thing you want. Haha, you should know how important it is. Li Jinsong snorted and said, If worst comes to worst, I will go to Shangjing and find Prime Minister Diwu. I will just put this matter aside for a while. His tone was unusually decisive. The man in black pondered for a while and finally softened. Fine, brotherly, I won't hide it from you. The 1,000-year-old crystal spirit mushroom you want is very difficult to find. The Prime Minister has already sent out 18 teams to look for it. Once it is found, it will be delivered to you immediately. He laughed and said, The Prime Minister knows that this is what you are most anxious about, right? Brotherly, you are really a sentimental person. But this kind of treasure can only be found by chance. Brotherly, you cannot be impatient. Li Jinsong snorted and said angrily, I can wait. I can even wait for 100 years. But my wife cannot wait. She is waiting for this thing to save her life. Of course, of course. So even though Prime Minister Diwu did not let us bring the 1,000-year-old crystal spirit mushroom, he did let us bring the 3 lives pill. The man in black laughed and said, 3 pills. Li Jinsong suddenly raised his head. Really? Not only him, even Chu Yang, who was eavesdropping on the side, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. 3 lives pill! 1,000-year-old crystal spirit mushroom! These were all things that could only be found by chance. What did Li Jinsong want? The 3 lives pill was not a medicinal pill. Instead, it was a strange kind of fruit. The plant of this fruit only sprouted in the first season, and withered in 10 years. After another 20 years, it would sprout and branch again. After 50 years, it would become a small tree. It withered and rotted once again. Another 50 years later, it sprouted for the 3rd time. After 200 years, it grew into a mature plant. It bloomed for 1 season, and the flowers were extremely poisonous. Then it bore this kind of fruit. It was the 3 lives pill. After the fruit ripened, it became the size of an apricot. The plant immediately withered and never relapsed again. 3 times, 330 years, only 1 fruit was born. One could imagine how precious this fruit was. The effects were even better. It could cure chronic illnesses, cure terminal illnesses, heal serious injuries, cultivate one's vitality, and increase one's lifespan. As for the 1,000-year crystal Ganoderma, it was a legendary item. It was one of the most miraculous medicines in the world. Its specific effects were enough to bring the dead back to life. However, Chu Yang didn't know its specific effects. However, both of these miraculous medicines were related to curing illnesses. Could it be that Li Jinsong's wife is sick? This Prime Minister Diwu was actually so generous, taking out 3 Sanxing Dan for Li Jinsong at once. These 3 Sanxing Dan are enough to protect your wife for 3 years. The man in black took out a black jade box and said, Prime Minister Diwu told me to tell you that if you can't find the crystal Ganoderma after 3 years, he can only give you other compensation. He said with a heavy tone. Prime Minister Diwu clearly told me not to deceive you about this matter. The Prime Minister said that although we are working together for each other's benefit, being honest with each other is the most important thing. These are the words of the Prime Minister himself. Li Jinsong lowered his head and was silent for a while. Then he said in a low voice, Thank you for your honesty. Li Jinsong understands. He lowered his head, and the sky was dark. Chu Yang couldn't see his expression, but behind the big rock, Chu Yang sneered in his heart. This Prime Minister Diwu's words were pleasant to hear, but from Li Jinsong's words, even the lives of my family are in your hands. What glory and splendor are you talking about? It was clear. Li Jinsong was blinded by greed, but he didn't do this willingly. He was under a certain degree of coercion. Coercing his people to talk about honesty? If Li Jinsong really believed it, then he would be the biggest fool in the world. The Sanxing Dan is extremely precious. You must keep it well. Normally, put it in this black jade box. Do not open it unless you need to use it. You must know that every time you open it, the spiritual energy of the Sanxing Dan will decrease. The man in black solemnly said, This matter in Iron Cloud, we brothers must report it to Prime Minister Diwu as soon as possible. If the Prime Minister knows, he will make arrangements. Brotherly, we will take our leave. Li Jinsong clasped his hands and said, I won't see you out. He was already holding the black jade box tightly in his arms. The 3 men in black had been gone for a long time. Li Jinsong was still standing in the same place. After a long time, he sighed and walked back with the black jade box. Not long after, his figure disappeared into the darkness. Chu Yang was still hiding behind the big rock. Even his breathing had not changed. Sure enough, with a gust of wind, Li Jinsong's figure appeared again. He circled around to make sure that no one was eavesdropping. Then he flew away. He had finally left. Chu Yang breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that the secret he had eavesdropped on today was related to the life and death of Beyond the Heavens sect. It was extremely important. If he was discovered, escaping would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He had to be cautious. No one would have thought that the traitor of Beyond the Heavens sect was the second in command of the sect, the powerful Li Jinsong. Chu Yan was about to stand up and move his stiff limbs when suddenly his whole body tensed up. He quietly raised his head to look at the scene. On the stage, at the place where the four of them were talking, a black-clothed figure had appeared without a sound. Chu Yang's scalp was numb because he did not notice when this person had arrived. This person was dressed in black and had a tall stature. He stood there for a long time without moving. After a while, he suddenly sighed deeply and lightly said, "Chu Yang, you can come out." Chu Yang's scalp suddenly exploded. It seemed that this person had noticed his arrival. And he even recognized him. It was too late to leave now. And this person's tone did not seem to have any evil intentions. Chu Yang's heart hardened. He stood up and walked forward step by step. "You heard everything, right?" The person with his hands behind his back said to Chu Yang. "Yes, you also heard everything, right? I'm afraid you heard it even more clearly than me?" Chu Yang smiled faintly, squinted his eyes and asked back. The person let out a low laugh and slowly turned around. At this time, the darkest moment had passed. The sky was gradually becoming hazy. The faint starlight in the sky shone on this person's face. 3 strands of black beard floated in front of his chest. His face was square and serious. He was not angry, but he was dignified. Chu Yang looked and could not help but be even more surprised. He was so surprised that he almost could not speak. This person was the current sect master of Beyond the Heavens sect. Wu Yunliang. Why was he here? If he was here, then he must have known about Li Jinsong's scheme. Why did he not stop him? For a moment, Chu Yang's heart was filled with doubts. He only felt confused. Even though he had lived 2 lives, he could not understand the complexity of this situation. He could not figure out what was going on. "Follow me." Wu Yunliang looked at the gradually brightening sky. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed Chu Yang's sleeve, pulling him along as they ran. After turning left and right, they turned into a valley not far from Purple Bamboo Garden. Although this valley was not very remote, it was very desolate. Because there was nothing inside, Chu Yang and the others did not come here. Here there was a cave in the mountain wall, forming a natural cave. It was not even 2 feet deep. "Come in." Wu Yunliang led the way. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.